Hello everyone, I am Mr. Brian. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. This case is a bit different from ones we have previously covered. As part of this episode, we traveled to film on location and talked to people connected to the case. We have done this episode in collaboration with Naomi Channel from The Real Podcast. Naomi is an award-winning television producer, and her podcast is head and shoulders above the rest. She seeks the truth, asks the difficult questions, and treats the stories with the empathy and respect they deserve. So if you want to listen to a deep dive on this case, complete with interviews from various people, please go and listen to Real. This case is a complex one, with many people involved, many lines of inquiry and more questions than answers. Although the case we are talking about today took place in Blackpool in the northwest of England, our story actually begins in the Midlands city of Coventry. Coventry is a remarkable city with an extraordinary past, notable for its cathedral that was bombed during the Second World War. As were huge swathes of the city, the spirit of the people, and the determination to rebuild, meant that Coventry was named as a city of peace and reconciliation. It put its mark on the musical map too, being the center of the music phenomenon that swept through the 70s, two-tone, with bands like The Special seeing considerable success. Our story begins in 1989, when on the 25th of March, Karen Downs and her husband Robert, known as Bob, welcomed their daughter Charlene. Charlene was their third child. She had two older sisters, Rebecca, known as Becky, and Emma. Charlene was later followed by the youngest of the Downs children, and the only son, Robert. Charlene was described as a music and animal lover, someone who was close to her siblings, with a cheeky and funny side. Bob and Karen had married on the 2nd of May, 1987, at a church in Hillfields, just north of Coventry's city center. Hillfields is one of the more deprived areas of the city, with antisocial behavior and crime being common problems. Life in the Downs household could be described as chaotic or dysfunctional, and run-ins with the police and social services would happen. Those who knew the couple made allegations that Bob was addicted to alcohol and could show serious levels of violence and aggression towards his children. A court document from 1989 showed that the family had been under investigation by social services and West Midlands police, and it was found that a convicted rapist had had 3-year-old Emma in their car without supervision, and had also been in the Downs family home. Bob was given the advice that the person in question should not be allowed into the home again. But this didn't happen, and Bob continued to have drinks with the individual in the pub. The police conducted a video interview with Emma in the hope it would unveil something more, but she disclosed nothing. She would later move out of the family home and in 1993 moved in with her grandfather and his wife. After Emma moved back to the family home in 1997, allegations of sexual assault were made against a family friend, allegations also made by Charlene. The friend was allegedly trusted by the family to take the children to school in the morning, and a report from social services states that it was believed Karen and Bob were aware of the abuse but failed to act. When Charlene was 9 years old, an allegation was made that a friend of her parents had forced themselves on her. Now, at the risk of the children being removed from the home and taken into the care of social services and the potential prosecution for neglect, in 1999, the family moved out of Coventry and up north to Blackpool. For many, Blackpool brings back memories of the illuminations, arcades, and ice creams on the beach. During the day, the piers, promenade, and beach are full of tourists looking for some time away. Home to the Blackpool Tower and the Tower Ballroom, many a famous face has performed in the town. Everyone from Frank Sinatra to the Beatles. Thousands of people visit Blackpool every year during the summer months and tourist season, especially for the illumination switch on. But behind the bright lights lies a very different town. A large proportion of those who live there live in deprived areas, and it is the 6th most deprived authority in England. There are high amounts of unemployment, and the death rate of those who die from alcohol-related deaths is the highest in England. There are also high levels of poverty, and the town is the 12th poorest area in the whole country. As concerns over the welfare of the children continued to grow, Charlene, Emma, and Becky were placed in foster care, after they said they no longer wanted to be at home. This placement did not last for an extended period of time, and the children were returned to the house. In 1999, Becky Downs alleged that her father was violent, and social services said they were going to take it to court to try and obtain a prosecution. By the end of 1999, the children were put on the at-risk register, and it was reported that domestic violence was present in the home. One of Charlene's friends, Martin, said he not only saw Bob's violence, but also predators at the Downs house. By early 2000, at the age of 11, Charlene was staying at different homes and told the workers from social services that she was being beaten by her parents, showing them bruises. In March of that year, Charlene's school began to raise concerns that she was failing to attend classes and wasn't coming to school. Her parents said they didn't know where she was, as she stayed with many different people. A few months later, in June, Charlene was examined by the hospital, and based on what it found, it was suspected that she was the victim of sexual abuse. She made the allegation that her father had become violent and thrown her across the room. Following this, she disappeared for 2 days. Over the course of a 12-month period, Charlene would make 13 visits to a sexual health clinic with her grandmother. She had bruising on her body, including her inner thigh. Social services spoke to Bob about their concerns, that Emma had been seen with older men in the family home, and Bob later moved out to appease those from social services. He moved to Buchanan Street in September and took Charlene and her brother Robert out of the care of social services and against the wishes of the authorities. As 2001 rolled around, social services suspected that a male was in the family home and sharing a bed with Charlene. In April of that year, there were more allegations made by Becky and Charlene regarding Bob's excessive drinking and the men he used to bring to the house, and the inappropriate sexual advances these men would make. Charlene allegedly told a social worker that one of her father's friends had touched her inappropriately. When health visitors made a visit to the family home in August, Charlene was found in bed with a much older man as she counted some money, but Bob and Karen said he was just a family friend. Becky would move out. Over a period of 15 years, 16 men who had committed a variety of offenses against minors had access to the family homes, both in Coventry and in Blackpool. Bob and Karen denied letting predators stay at their home. Bob would drink at various pubs in and around Blackpool. During one of his visits to the pub, he met a man called Ray Monroe, and he invited him back to the house. Ray Monroe would end up staying at the property. Monroe is a convicted sex offender with 4 counts of sexual assaults against young girls, and he was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Karen and Bob said they were unaware of this, and only found out when the details came out in court. They said they believed he had raped an ex-girlfriend, information which did not stop them from allowing him into their home. One of Bob's friends, Glenn, claimed he saw Bob invite various men from the pub back to his house, and that he had seen Charlene sitting on Monroe's lap. He said he voiced his concerns about seeing this, and said that it wasn't right. 2003, Charlene visited a walk-in health center 3 times. Karen claimed to be unaware of Charlene going to the health clinic, and also unaware of the predator staying in her home. Despite moving to a different part of the country, it seemed that not much had changed, and family life was still fractured and difficult. The 3rd of November 2003, Charlene, Dad, can you give me a description, please? She's got shoulder-length dark brown hair. She's got a fringe. She's got a fringe as well. What was she wearing? She's had a black jumper on, with like white diamonds on the jumper. How old is she? 14. How come you've not reported her till now, when she's only 14? Unless you can come back and see. But obviously not. I know I should have reported it before. Are you at 109 Buchanan now? Yes, I am. Yes. I've got to go out, sorry. I've got to go out shortly though. I'm sorry, your daughter's 14, and you need to stay in so we can take care of something else. Okay. We'll get someone to speak to you. The police conducted a search of the family home and found nothing relating to Charlene or anything that gave any clues as to where she might have gone. They needed to work backwards. What follows is a timeline of what is believed to be Charlene's last known movements, although the details of this remain debated, and there are differing opinions as to where she went that night. As part of this documentary, we went to Blackpool and met with Renee Crompton, who runs the Justice for Charlene Downs campaign. She walked us through the route that Charlene is believed to have taken that night. This timeline is also compiled using the timeline issued by Lancashire Police. but again it's important to remember that the details do differ. The 1st of November 2003, at 3:25 p.m., Charlene and Becky were walking down Bank Hay Street to get to the Coral Island Arcade. Charlene's friend Tasha corroborated this and said she had seen her there too. According to the police timeline, Charlene returned to the family home before going back out later in the evening. It is believed that Charlene and Becky went to the McDonald's close to the later that evening. The pair then headed to Church Street and walked up it at around 6:45 p.m. It's alleged that they met with Karen Downs as she handed out leaflets for the restaurant she worked at, which was located on Church Street. Charlene then headed to a phone box on Leopold Grove before saying goodbye to her mother and going off with her friends. It's reported that Karen Downs gave them money. According to the police timeline, Charlene stayed with her friends for a while before setting off to Corn Street, and the details of what she did in the following hour are not known, but according to the police she met another friend. Charlene and her friend Tyne went to the Carousel Bar at 9:30 p.m., where Tyne said men bought the pair drinks before Tyne lost sight of her. She said she never saw Charlene again. This does differ from the police timeline, which says they went back into town before going their separate ways near Abington Street and Talbot Street at 11 p.m. The last claimed sighting of Charlene was in an alleyway off of Abington Street at 11 p.m. This alleyway is somewhat notorious in Blackpool. Various takeaways back onto it, and young girls in the town would often use the alley to go into the shops via the back doors, later returning with things like money and cigarettes. Charlene had been expelled from school, and as she was now lacking in structure and routine, she would spend more time in the town center and in the alleyway. As the investigation continued, there was no sign of Charlene Downs. Missing persons posters were put up, and people were hoping for any news of her whereabouts. But the investigation soon stalled, and the leads were proving fruitless. Then more than a year later in November 2004, someone would come forward, and the case would take a dramatic turn. A man called David Cassidy came forward to the police with a disturbing story to tell. David Cassidy owned a local business that supplied slot machines to shops in the area. He said that a man called Tariq had claimed his brother Ayed al-Batiki had confessed to murdering Charlene, and that another man called Mohammed Revashur had helped him to cover it up. Mohammed Revashur had been born in Iran before moving to the UK. He owned and operated Funny Boys fast food on Dixon Road, which is how he knew David Cassidy. One of his employees was his friend and tenant, Ayed al-Batiki, who was originally from Jordan. This was the break that the police had been looking for. They asked David if he would wear a concealed microphone and talk to Tariq again to ensure that the conversation was recorded. David agreed. In the recording, Tariq is heard saying he never said those things, adding that it was bullshit. The police would later insist they had never seen or heard this recording. In January 2005, the police conducted a search of the home of Mohammed Revashur, but nothing of note was found. On the 22nd of February, Mohammed and Ayed were brought in for informal questioning, and whilst this was taking place, wiretaps were put in place to record conversations as part of a covert operation. During the operations, Mohammed could be heard speaking to somebody about David Cassidy. They joked that he should be killed, and then turned into a kebab. Mohammed's friend says, "You have a kebab shop, sell it." Mohammed laughs and replies, "Yeah, make a fake little kebab." While the police were conducting their covert operations, a woman whose identity is protected said she had gone into Funny Boys for a coffee after having a few drinks at another establishment. She said she had then woken up in the upstairs flat. She was on a bed with no clothes on. She could not recall how she had come to be in the flat, or why she was naked. She said she quickly got dressed and ran out of the building down the alley. She stated she heard a man calling out to her and asking her to come back. When she looked back at him, she said he was holding some money in his hand. She went to the police to report the incident, and the police allegedly told her that the person responsible was Ayed al-Batiki and that he had raped her and filmed it. The woman also claimed that two police officers, John Besant and Don Fraser, asked her to make claims that she couldn't be sure were true. She refused and her case was dropped. No investigation was undertaken, and charges were not filed. Covert recordings were made over 4 weeks and produced 52 CDs in total. However, officers would later describe the recordings as too distorted to use. One of the officers working on the case was Jan Besant, a detective sergeant. She offered to transcribe the tapes and would spend the next 2 years doing this. as well as running the takeaway business. Mohammed used to be a foster father for vulnerable children in Blackpool. Jan Besant questioned one of Mohammed's former foster daughters, and she confirmed that there was nothing untoward about him and offered no incriminating or otherwise suspicious stories about him. However, one of Mohammed's ex-foster daughters would later accuse him of sexual assault. Mohammed also lived 2 doors down from Dawn Fraser. He was also working on Charlene's case. Mohammed alleged that Dawn's wife had said that Dawn had difficulty performing in the bedroom and that she had made a pass at Mohammed. Mohammed said he turned her down, and this situation was the root cause of Dawn's issues with him and their falling out. This story was very different from Dawn's. Dawn later claimed that his relationship with Mohammed had fallen apart. After hearing that Mohammed had shown a pornographic video to underage girls in his home, he added that his wife had never liked Mohammed. These are allegations that Mohammed refuted. With still no sign of Charlene, the police changed their strategy. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was now a murder inquiry. The 17th of March, 2006, it was reported that 2 people had been arrested. Aid al-Batiki had been charged with murdering Charlene Downs, and Mohammed Ravachur was charged with helping him dispose of her body. In May 2007, at Preston Crown Court, Mohammed Ravachur and Aid al-Batiki went on trial. The prosecution claimed that either Mohammed or Aid had been having a sexual relationship with Charlene, and that if the police had found out, they would have been in trouble. But both men said they didn't even know her, let alone have a sexual relationship with her. However, multiple people would later state that they had seen Charlene behind the counter at the takeaway shop, as well as experiencing inappropriate behavior. Emma Downs described Aid as a creep, and said she had seen him behaving badly in nightclubs towards young girls. The police also claimed that there had been multiple allegations of sexual assault lodged against Aid. Mohammed's house had been searched extensively. Carpets and floorboards were removed and the property was gone through with a fine-tooth comb. No DNA evidence was found. The police said that the house had been cleaned, but Mohammed argued that there was no evidence for them to find there in the first place. The defense requested that the audio recording of the conversation between David and Tarek be submitted, only to be told it couldn't be found. The court then ordered that the police needed to find the audio and give it to them, and the CD was subsequently found, but it had a huge scratch on it. And as a result, the police said they believed it wouldn't be playable. Jan Besant would later claim that if the audio CD had been properly declared, approval would not have been given to search Mohammed's home, nor to putting the recording devices in place. Dawn Fraser's account had been the one to enter the audio CD of the conversation with Tarek into the system, but he said this was not him, and that he had been framed by someone else using his PC and logon details. He would later say, "To say my heart sank when I heard this tape is an understatement. I didn't know anything about these CDs from 2005. I haven't got a clue what happened." During the proceedings, the covert recordings were played to the court, and the transcriptions made by Detective Sergeant Jan Besant were the captions. Claims were made during the trial that after Charlene had been murdered, her body had been dismembered and put into kebabs in the takeaway, and that her bones had been crushed up and put into the grouting. There is no evidence for either of these things happening. This narrative has been pushed and repeated when discussing Charlene's case, in spite of the lack of evidence to back it up, reducing Charlene to nothing more than a cruel urban legend. After the defense and prosecution presented their cases, it was time for the jury to deliberate. After 49 hours of discussions, they had failed to come to a verdict. As a result, the jury was formally discharged. On the 15th of September that year, a memorial was held for Charlene, which was funded by the far-right British National Party. An inquiry was also set up by the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and it found that the investigation into Charlene's disappearance was handled unprofessionally. This led to 2 officers facing disciplinary action, and one of them subsequently being cleared of any wrongdoing. In April 2008, a retrial was ordered, but this would soon come to a grinding halt and later totally collapse. The Crown Prosecution Service, upon re-examining the evidence, found that there were serious issues with the evidence presented, and that they had grave doubts about how reliable some of the evidence was. The covert recordings were criticized for their poor quality, and the accuracy of the transcriptions made by Jan Besant was described as low. Mohammed Raveshi's lawyer, John Bromley Davenport, said that Detective Sergeant Besant was not qualified to listen to and transcribe the tapes. An expert would later re-examine the audio tapes of the covert recordings after they had been played to the court, and they too said they were not of a good enough quality to be evidence. It also found that some of the transcriptions were different words. For example, one phrase was transcribed as burial place, but it was argued what had actually been said was Paul's place. The tracker that had been put onto Muhammad's car then showed him going to see one of his friends who was named Paul. Forensic audiologist Elizabeth McClellan said that Jan Besant's transcripts should not have been used during the trial. She said this is a classic case of cognitive priming. The evidence presented by Jan Besant was potentially misleading. It's extremely important that when recordings are transcribed, that the person transcribing them has no prior awareness at all about that evidence. In this case, it shows several signs that she was subject to bias and influenced by the events that she was investigating. Both men were subsequently released. The charges against Ayed and Muhammad were dropped. They were acquitted and given £250,000 in compensation. Muhammad indicated upon his release that he would potentially sue the police force, describing what had happened to him as shameful, having spent more than 2 years on remand in prison. Muhammad said that David Cassidy, who had made the statement that had led to the police looking into him and Ayed, had worked for him at one point, but he had been forced to let him go as he was bad at his job. David was enraged by being fired and proceeded to harass Muhammad, as well as vandalize the shop. Tensions reached a boiling point when the pair ended up having a physical altercation. It was after this that David gave his statements to the police regarding what had allegedly been said to him. In 2011, Jan Besant was found guilty of 2 counts of misconduct and was forced to resign from the police force. Lancashire Police said her conduct had let everyone down. The IPCC Commissioner for the Northwest, Nassim Malik, said it was abundantly clear that the covert recordings and the investigation had been handled poorly and unprofessionally. Superintendent Simon Giles said that the police expects the highest professional standards from all our staff, and the panel has found that this individual's conduct has fallen well short of these standards. The ruling that Jan Besant be forced to resign was later overturned by the British Arbitration Tribunal, and they said she should be reinstated. The years would pass, tourists would come and go, and the town would carry on, but there was still no sign of Charlene Downs. It had now been 8 years since Charlene had vanished from the streets of Blackpool. The police looking into her case found that more than 60 teenage girls had been the victims of grooming by people working in various takeaway shops throughout the town. Charlene's friend Tasha said that she had seen grooming in Blackpool firsthand and had also been groomed. Charlene's friend Martin and another friend Sean said that they had witnessed Charlene going into takeaway shops and then coming back out with cigarettes, money, or alcohol. Charlene's friend Tyne said that she too would go into the alleyway and trade sexual contact for drugs, cigarettes, money, and alcohol. Tyne said on the occasion she went to the alleyway with Charlene. Charlene would act as a lookout in case the police came, and Tyne would give her money for doing this. 10 years ago to this day, the troubled teenager was last spotted in a bar on the North Pier with a vodka and coke before disappearing into a maze of arcades and kebab shops, never to be seen again. It's something like which I wouldn't like to wish on anybody. I mean, when you lose one of your own babies, it's devastating enough. But 10 years on, it's still like as if it was like yesterday. As the years went by, her case became a cause célèbre for the far right. They blamed Muslim pedophile gangs, BNP leader Nick Griffin, even doorstep prosecutors demanding justice. Were demanding a public inquiry into the failure of the establishment to protect young girls from grooming gangs. But the list of potential suspects stretched right across the social spectrum and included some who'd associated with Charlene's family. Lancashire police were heavily criticized for flawed investigations which delivered incoherent covert recordings. Now the inquiry is to be reopened and linked to the 2007 disappearance of 15-year-old Paige Chivers, another victim of grooming on the seafront. They were both victims of child sexual exploitation in the same area of Lancashire, and so that is the link. Their paths to their tragic fate were exactly the same, and in that respect the profiles of these 2 murders are very similar. Exploitation under the bright lights among the fruit machines, and Donny kebabs went on for years. Charlene and Paige were not the only ones. Police believe there could have been up to 60 victims, and are hoping this post-civil world will give them a voice. Paige Chivers was a 15-year-old girl who went missing from Blackpool for years after Charlene. Robert Ewing was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years. He had murdered her after she had threatened to go to the police and tell them about the sexual contact he had had with her. Ewing, a self-confessed neo-Nazi, had been previously convicted for gross indecency and indecent assault against a 12-year-old girl. In 2014, a Crime Watch appeal was launched, and a reward for any fruitful information was offered totaling £100,000. Back in 2003, 14-year-old Charlene Downs from Blackpool vanished. The case was marred in controversy from the start, with widespread allegations of child abuse in the town and failings in the subsequent police inquiry. But now there's a fresh investigation with a new team of detectives who we can reveal are tonight launching a staggering £100,000 reward for information. Just take us through this, Andrew. What is it you think that you're seeing here, and why is it so important? This is the CCTV from the 1st November 2003, and we have a confirmed sighting of Charlene that evening, with a lady with dyed blonde hair in her 30s with a 3/4 length black coat, and we need to trace that woman. So if that woman is you, or you know who she is, I'd urge you to come forward and speak to us and tell us who she is so we can take this case forward. Okay, Detective Superintendent Andrew Webster, thank you so much for updating us on this very important case. As you've heard, it's been 11 years of agony for her family. Surely it's time we finally knew what really happened to Charlene. In 2016, a cold case team was brought on board to examine Charlene's case, and they found CCTV that had previously not been released to the public. It showed Charlene and Becky walking on the day Charlene had gone missing. It was released to the public in November of that year to try and generate any new leads. And a Crime Watch appeal was issued again on the 13th anniversary of her going missing. In 2017, Karen and Bob Downs sued Lancashire police over their handling of their daughter's case and the CCTV footage. August 2017, an arrest was made. A man was taken into custody on suspicion of the murder of Charlene Downs. Nigel had worked as a chef, and a restaurant he worked at in Blackpool appeared on an episode of Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, Clubway 41. Nigel had attacked two 15-year-old girls in Blackpool in 2001 and 2003. He was convicted of these in 2017 and sentenced to 64 months, more than 5 years in prison. The flat Nigel was living in overlooked the alleyway Charlene would often be seen in and where she had allegedly been on the night she disappeared. Tonight said she knew Nigel Lloyd and referred to him as a creep. He also knew Charlene and her family. He was released after 2 days without charge, and no charges have ever been filed against him in relation to Charlene's disappearance. November 2018, Bob and Karen appeared on The Jeremy Kyle Show, a controversial British talk show where guests would appear to resolve conflicts, take lie detector tests, and DNA tests. There would be frequent confrontations and arguments on stage. Bob Downs later said they had appeared on the show to discuss Charlene's case. But it quickly devolved into talking about their marriage and marital problems. Also that year, Karen Downs released a book called Sold in Secret, talking about Charlene and her disappearance. In 2021, Charlene's brother Robert tragically passed away. He was found in a pool of blood by Bob on the 4th of December at 11:30 p.m., a few hours before he had complained he felt unwell. His family said he had been left deeply affected by the disappearance of his sister, and had never been able to properly process or recover from it. At an inquest, it was ruled he had died of an accidental drugs overdose. It also came out that Bob and Karen did not call the ambulance for 3 hours. They said after finding him, they had fallen into a state of panic and anxiety. The ambulance wasn't called until nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. In November the following year, Charlene's friend Tyne died at the age of 32. An inquest found her death was drug-related. In 2023, the case was reopened by the Leeds Trinity University Cold Case Unit, teamed up with Renee, in the hopes of finally solving Charlene's case. Renee said, "Our main aim is to review Charlene's case and see where the failings are, and go out to get new evidence." Blackburn Uni also approached us to undertake a large child sexual exploitation project for the whole of Lancashire to find out the scale of the problem and where children are being failed. Bob and Karen said they had been verbally abused and taunted by locals after it came out that Raymond Rowe and other predators had stayed at their house. Bob again asserted he didn't know Raymond Rowe was a pedophile. They remain living in Blackpool. Unfortunately, Charlene's story is not unique. There are a plethora of young people who constantly fall through the cracks, and the people that should be there to catch them aren't. An internal police report would state that 11 takeaway shops in Blackpool town centre had been involved in sexually exploiting young girls. As reported by the BBC, the Times newspaper conducted an investigation that found the police initially had 100 people of interest due to how many people were believed to be abusing and exploiting Charlene. And that brings us to today. Today marks the 20th anniversary of Charlene's disappearance, and there are still more questions than answers. The investigation into what happened to her is one of the longest running in Lancashire, with 2,500 statements being taken, and more than 3,000 people being spoken to. This is about getting justice for a 14-year-old girl. She was someone who had already gone through so much in such a short period of time, and the least we can do is continue to fight for her. As Renee said, Charlene was failed by everyone that should have kept her safe. The police, social services, they all let her down. We're trying to build a legacy and fight for real justice for her so she can be remembered for something positive. It is our hope that those who know more will come forward with the truth. Her whereabouts will finally be made known, and justice will be served. Story 2. Emily Grace Jones was born in Bolton on the 18th of January 2013 to parents Sarah and Mark. Mark worked as a credit manager, and Sarah was a solicitor. Emily was their only child. Emily was described as being full of joy and laughter, with a heart as big as her smile. She loved the great outdoors and playing sports, throwing herself into anything and everything. She was fearless and loved to go hiking and climbing, as well as swimming and riding horses. Mark said his daughter was a bit of a daredevil who was sociable and outgoing. Her teachers said she was creative and loved to draw and write stories. She was very popular with those in her class and got along with everyone. Bright and hard-working, she would often joke with her teachers that she had finished her work before her classmates had even written the date. Although Mark and Sarah were no longer together, they were still on good terms and committed to co-parenting Emily. Mark would usually look after Emily on Sundays, and he and Sarah had arranged to meet in Queen's Park on Sunday, March 2020. That Sunday was Mother's Day, and Emily had given her mother a card that morning to celebrate. At around 2:15 p.m., Emily and Mark were in the park, and she was whizzing around on her scooter, and her dad was encouraging her to go faster. Emily saw Sarah, who was jogging, and said to Mark, "Daddy, Daddy, I want to go to Mom." He told her she could, and she set off. Emily called out to Sarah, but Sarah didn't hear her because she had headphones in and was too far away. As Emily scooted over, Mark saw a woman stand up from a bench and go towards his daughter, and Emily was suddenly on the ground, but he was unsure exactly what had happened. He assumed that she'd fallen over as he could hear her crying and that the woman was helping her up. People nearby began shouting, clearly horrified and distressed, saying that his daughter had been stabbed. The woman, who had her hood up, briskly walked away with a knife in her hand. Mark immediately ran over to his daughter. She had a catastrophic injury to her neck and was struggling to breathe. Her dad told her, "Just stay with me, Emily. Stay with me. Don't leave me." Sarah was still in the park, but was unaware of what had happened. Mark called her, and a nurse came over and quickly began to try and help Emily. She was deteriorating rapidly. One of the people in the park at the time, Tony Canny, was there with his wife and baby daughter. He ran after the woman who had been seen with Emily as she tried to flee the scene. He wasn't exactly sure what had happened or if she was armed, but continued to chase her. Tony's wife gave Mark her baby's muslin cloth to try and stop Emily's heavy bleeding. The emergency services arrived within minutes, and paramedics worked quickly to try and save her. The first paramedic to get there saw Emily being hugged by her father from behind as she lay on the ground. She was bleeding heavily and unconscious. She was also in cardiac arrest. The paramedics began to administer CPR, and she was given adrenaline before being loaded into the air ambulance. As he pursued her, Tony's wife told him that the woman had a knife on her, but he still bravely carried on, disregarding his own safety, instead prioritizing the safety of others. He knocked the woman to the ground and sat on her to stop her from running away, and also called 999, telling the operator there's been an incident at Queen's Park in Bolton and a child's bleeding. He also spoke about the woman. "I don't know what she's saying. She is agitated." His wife also heard the woman saying that she no longer needed injections. Tony had killed her family and that he was killing her. Tony told her, "You're not well. The police will help you." The woman said to Tony, "I don't need you to tell me to be calm." He proceeded to keep hold of her until the police arrived and took over. "Yeah, Hands, take the bag down. Let me take your bag off. Stay still. Okay. Hands behind your back. Thank you. Have you seen a child anywhere? Is she on her own? Right. A child's down there. Get down there quick. Yes, it's in my bag. What is in my bag? ID, everything. She was subsequently taken into custody. What's in your backpack? ID and everything. ID? Yes. And the knife? Right. The time now is 14:45. At this moment in time, you're under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. You do not have to say anything, but it may be defensive if you do not mention something when questioned, that you let your line in court. And if you do so, may be given evidence. Okay, your arrest is necessary to protect vulnerable people and to ensure a prompt and effective investigation to this offense. Yeah, okay. What's your name? Elshanana Skarna. Elshanana Skarna. Okay, where do you live? 19 Turnstone Road. 19 Turnstone. Yes. Right, just wait there. Just confirm to me what's inside your bag. You can control. It's just no bombs. No nothing. It's just my ID card. ID card. My mom's ID card. Yeah. There's a knife, some water, some juice. Okay. Nothing. Okay, that's it. So there's nothing that's going to hurt me. No. A cordon was put up around the area, and specialist officers were on the case, trying to build a clear picture of what had happened. Emily was taken to Salford Royal Hospital, and the helicopter landed there at 3:27 p.m. She was ventilated and given blood transfusions, but remained in cardiac arrest. Tragically, at 3:56 p.m., all the attempts to restart her heart had failed, and Emily's time of death was called. This was now a murder inquiry. The following day, Sarah was given the awful task of formally identifying her daughter's body. A post-mortem was carried out, and it was determined that Emily had died from an incised wound to the neck. In a statement, her family said, "We are beyond devastated that this random act of violence means we will never get to see our beautiful little girl grow up into the wonderful young lady was showing such promise of becoming. It is truly heartbreaking to wake up to a world without Emily in it, and we cannot comprehend why this has happened. We would like to thank the members of the public that assisted us in the park, and express our gratitude to the emergency services for doing their utmost to save Emily's life." The community was in shock. The teachers from her school were heartbroken, and her headmistress paid tribute to her, saying, "I want you to know how much Emily was loved. She will be missed by all her friends and all the staff. Her loss has left a hole in our hearts, and the school will never be the same again." The police needed to start building a picture of their suspect. The woman they had arrested was 30-year-old Elshanana Skarna, and she was detained under the Mental Health Act. Dr. Suhanthini Farrell was the on-call doctor when she was arrested. She was said to be cooperative and calm, and when asked about her mental state, she responded, "Not very well." She said she couldn't remember anything about the park, but Dr. Farrell said this appeared to be because she didn't want to discuss it, not because she couldn't remember it. Dr. Farrell also described her as emotionless. When she was arrested, she was found to have wire tied around her toes. A police officer asked what this was for, and Elshan responded that it was to help her with her emotions. Before it was taken off, she tried to tighten it around her toes again. A doctor would later say that this was indicative of a psychotic action. Elshanana Skarna had been born in February 1990 in Albania. According to Elshan's sister, their father had got into debt, and in February 2012, Elshan was forced to marry the man he owed money to, and they then moved to Kuwait. She fled in September the following year, and returned to Albania. In 2014, she left Albania again, and this time headed to Frankfurt, Germany, and on the 11th of August, her sister paid for her to go to the United Kingdom. She was taken via Italy and France, and entered the UK in a lorry 2 days later, on August 13. She had made an application to the Home Office for asylum, but this was rejected in June 2018. An appeal was made, and this decision was reversed, and she was then given a residency permit to remain in the country until the 28th of November 2020, and then leave to remain until November 2024. This was despite her later admitting to doctors that she had lied in her application and falsely said she was a victim of sexual exploitation, something she had said to improve her chances of being allowed to stay in the country. The Home Office has not revealed if they were informed that she had admitted to lying. In March of 2015, her mental health was not in a good place, and she was assessed by a doctor who determined that she had post-traumatic stress disorder and she was subsequently referred for treatment. However, she failed to turn up for her cognitive behavioral therapy session, and her case was therefore closed. Just a few months later in July, Elsiona had grabbed a knife and believed she was going to be attacked. Her sister reported it, and Elsiona was sectioned and admitted to Royal Bolton Hospital for treatment. She was diagnosed with acute schizophrenia-like psychotic symptoms. She believed her neighbors were planning to hurt her by using her electricity. When she was granted leave by the hospital, she would run away on several occasions. After refusing oral medication, she was given antipsychotic medications via injection. She did lodge an appeal against being sectioned, but on the 20th of August, 2018, it was determined that she was well enough to be released, as the feelings she had about her neighbors trying to hurt her had reduced, as had her feelings of being persecuted. As part of being released, she was visited by mental health workers between 1 and 2 times a week. Elsiona complained about the injections of the antipsychotic medications, saying she didn't like the side effects. In November 2015, she was taken off the medication, but her mental health would soon deteriorate again. On the 9th of December, she told doctors at the Salford Royal Hospital that she was having auditory hallucinations on a daily basis. It was reported that Elsiona's own mother did not believe she should be on medication, and didn't agree with the decision to prescribe her any. In January 2017, she refused to let her care coordinator come into her property, and did not attend a scheduled meeting. Her sister was now greatly concerned about Elsiona's mental health, and that she was suffering a relapse, so she arranged for a team to visit her again on the 13th of February. But before this could happen, Elsiona would commit a shocking act of violence. Her mother had come to visit her, and she had found that Elsiona had been trying to hurt herself. Elsiona led her mother upstairs and proceeded to chain the door shut. She said that once she killed her mother, everything would be okay. She then attacked her with an iron, stabbed her hand, and was only stopped when a friend intervened. She was subsequently arrested and detained under the Mental Health Act. It later emerged that she had disconnected the boiler, removed the light bulbs in the property, and got rid of her television. She would again leave the hospital without permission, and at 5 a.m. went to a friend's house and demanded to speak to their 13-year-old daughter. She was armed with a knife that she had taken from a restaurant. The mother refused to let her inside. And when she asked Elsiona about what she had done to her hair, Elsiona said she had cut her hair off rather than cutting off people's heads. She was returned to the hospital by police, and on May 4th she was deemed fit for release. All appeared to go quiet. That was until March of 2018. Elsiona said she was not feeling well and requested to go back on injections. She said she was having hallucinations again. The following year she asked to be taken off the injections and be on oral medication instead. She remained stable, and her family's support appeared to help with her paranoia. Although she continued to avoid busy places and wore sunglasses to avoid eye contact. Her last visit with a mental health worker was on March 11, 2020, after having none for 3 months. It was so uneventful that the worker didn't even make any notes. Just 11 days later, she would take Emily's life. On the morning of March 22, 2020, Elsiona had left her home at around 1 p.m. and headed into Bolton Town Centre. She purchased a pack of 3 crafting knives from a pound shop, later telling a psychiatrist that she had bought them with the intention of killing someone. She then went to Queen's Park. A witness later reported that he had seen a woman sitting on the ground with her legs crossed next to a bench, and added that she appeared to be agitated. He noted that she had a vacant look on her face, which also caught his attention. He continued to watch her for around 4 minutes, but as she didn't say or do anything, he headed home. As Emily headed to Sarah, she went past the bench Elsiona was sat on with her hood pulled up. Out of nowhere she stood up, grabbed Emily into a headlock, and launched a ferocious attack against the little girl, stabbing her in the neck and slitting her throat. Police went to her flat and searched it and found a load of antipsychotic medication, totaling almost a month's worth that hadn't been taken. A doctor would later say that suddenly coming off of medication could cause someone's mental health to rapidly decline within just a few days. She was charged with murder and possession of a bladed article. She was remanded in custody and scheduled to appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court on Tuesday, May 26th. As the preliminary murder hearing got underway at Manchester Crown Court, Judge Richard Mantell QC expressed his sympathy for Emily's family, saying to Mark, "I can't imagine the level of pain you and your wife are going through at the moment, and you have my personal and deepest sympathy, as well as the sympathy of everyone involved in the court's process. Mark was there for the hearing, and Elshuna appeared via video link from Rampton Secure Hospital, a high-security psychiatric hospital, where she was being held. She ended a plea of guilty to manslaughter, on the grounds of diminished responsibility, and prosecutors were given 7 days to consider her plea. They eventually decided to push ahead with a murder trial. It was now time for Elshuna Skarner to go on trial for murder. The prosecution told the jury that it would be for them to decide whether or not this was actually a case of manslaughter, or if she was using her mental health condition as what they referred to a convenient excuse for what she had done. The court heard evidence that whilst in hospital she had spoken to a nurse, and the conversation had pointed to this being something that had been planned, therefore not manslaughter, but rather a premeditated and calculated killing. It also emerged that from the middle of December 2019 to March 11, the following year, she had not had any face-to-face contact with mental health workers. In a report read out to the court, one of the doctors said that Elshuna represented a very high risk of serious, potentially fatal harm to others. The court heard that whilst in hospital she had been reportedly watching a child's television program when a child who looked like Emily appeared on the screen. Elshuna began to laugh hysterically. She said to a nurse at the hospital, "Like I said, it's been 3 months. What do you want me to do, cry all the time?" Later telling the same nurse, "It was premeditated. I waited in a park and picked my victim. I did what I did, then tried to run away." It was noted that during these conversations, she was not on her medication. The court was told that on the 30th of July, staff at the hospital had been observing what was referred to as strange behavior with Elshuna telling nurses, "Your body has gone to your soul and we're all going to die." Dr. John Crosby, a consultant psychiatrist, would tell the court that Elshuna Skarner had paranoid schizophrenia, and said this had caused her to suffer from delusions and lose touch with reality. He said that there appeared to be no reason for Emily being singled out by her, adding that it was his conclusion she was in the midst of a psychotic episode when she took Emily's life. "It's such a terrible, rare, random attack. To my mind, I can't think of another reason why it could have occurred," he said. In a statement read to the jury, Mark said, "I do not know why this happened. Emily was simply riding her scooter to her mum. I simply can't explain it." He said that Emily was a vulnerable child full of innocence and wonder. She was just starting off on her path of life, and her future was cut short. "Our future has also been taken away. How can we enjoy life when the best part of it has been taken away?" Evidence was given by a consultant forensic psychiatrist from the hospital where Elshuna was being held, and it stated that the possibility of her being convicted of murder was not realistic. After the prosecution considered the medical evidence, it was agreed it would not be fair to ask a jury to convict her of the offense of murder, so the murder charge was withdrawn, and the jury was formally instructed to return a not guilty verdict on the charge of murder. Elshuna Skarner was therefore convicted of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Prosecutor Michael Brady QC told the court, "It is not a decision that has been taken lightly by the Crown. It's a decision taken with care and mindful of the sensitivity of the case. Having reviewed all the evidence in this case, the Crown has come to the conclusion that there is no longer any realistic prospect of conviction." Breaking news: and a woman who killed 7-year-old Emily Jones in a park in Bolton in March has been sentenced to life in prison. Gerard Tubbs outside the court in Manchester, and she's going to be held in a secure hospital. Gerard, and the judge sentenced her, as you say, to be detained under Section 45A of the Mental Health Act. She has been imprisoned for life with a minimum of 8 years, but she will initially be treated at Rampton High Security Hospital. If she's deemed well enough to leave there, she will go on to serve the rest of her sentence in hospital. The judge said she had to be punished because she had made the decision to buy the knife. She had made the decision to kill someone. There was an element of culpability in her action. The judge said in his sentencing remarks, "The devastating effects of what you did will live with Emily's parents and doubtless others who knew Emily forever. It is obvious that nothing I can do or say can restore Emily to her family or offer any real comfort to them in their immense loss." He said he was satisfied on the basis of the evidence given that she had paranoid schizophrenia, saying that the nature and degree of it warranted her detention in hospital. Elshuna Skarner will only be eligible for release after serving her minimum term and being assessed as no longer being a danger to the public. The judge added, "If you are never deemed fit for release, you will remain in hospital or prison for the remainder of your days. It was later reported that her minimum term had been increased from 8 years to 10 years and 8 months. The judge said the original sentence had been calculated in error and added that he took full responsibility for it. After her sentence was increased, Mark said, "I will keep fighting tooth and nail for her to stay there for the rest of her life. Whether it's 10 years or 20, it won't be enough for me. As far as I'm concerned, she's a danger to the public for the rest of her life. She'd do it again to any child. I would bet my bottom dollar on that." At the inquest into Emily's death, the acting senior coroner Alan Walsh said, "In my 20 years as a coroner, this is one of the most tragic deaths that I have dealt with, and the loss of a beautiful, innocent, lively, intelligent, and lovely 7-year-old in these circumstances is an unimaginable tragedy." A coroner has said the father of a 7-year-old girl killed by an asylum seeker is entitled to feel her killer should never have been allowed into the country. Emily Jones was attacked as she scooted through a Bolton park on Mother's Day in 2020. Her killer was Albanian asylum seeker Elshan Askana, who had a long history of poor mental health. From the inquest into Emily's death, here's our North of England reporter Kelly Foran. Despite Skana being well known to mental health services, the coroner today said that the local community teams could not have predicted or prevented Emily's death. He added, though, that if nothing changes nationally, there is a risk to future lives. The whole profession of psychiatry needs to come under the spotlight at some point. I think it's a real worry. It's just shocking. So we're just going to try and do our best, and Emily's. So Emily's death doesn't go in vain. So yeah, we'll just keep plugging away, right? Just try to promote mental health awareness and the dangers of relapse and not monitoring mental health. I've met with other families in the Greater Manchester area that have been affected by homicides and lack of funding in mental health. It's everybody knows this, In the light of Emily's killing and the issues around Skana's care in the community, Bolton coroner Timothy Brennan said he'd be writing a Regulation 28 prevention of future death report to the Secretary of State. He said it will make clear my profound concerns about morale, workload, training, staff shortages, and inability to deliver continuity of care. He said the case showed a sector of healthcare provision that is challenging and riven with operational stress and tension. I sense a healthcare sector in crisis. But he didn't believe Skana's behavior could have been predicted by her mental health team. Emily's father, however, said those tasked with monitoring Skana failed to realize just how dangerous she was. It's just shocking, and it's been a real just most distressing part of everything that's happened. I've listened to these so-called experts. They're just completely different opinions. No one really understood, as far as I'm concerned, the threat that the perpetrator posed. When talking about Altiona, the coroner Timothy Brennan said she had been deliberately masking her deteriorating condition, meaning that the mental health workers didn't know she was not taking her medication or that she was relapsing. He added that only with the benefit of hindsight could Altiona's actions have been predicted. We heard today from Altiona Skana's sister, who said that she was very unwell in the days and weeks leading up to the attack on 7-year-old Emily. She'd been complaining of hearing voices in her head. Now, her sister told the inquest that there had been previous incidents of violence where she'd tried to attack her and her mother, and there'd also been times when she'd been found with a knife outside screaming. She'd also displayed other concerning behavior, including cutting pipes to a boiler, and her sister Clastora said it was like living like a horror movie living with her. Now she disagreed with evidence given by Skana's consultant psychiatrist earlier today, who told the inquest that she was stable and hadn't any relapse symptoms of florid psychotic behavior in the weeks and months before the attack. Emily's father Mark said that although he was glad the inquest was over, he disagreed with the finding. "I cannot believe he has come to that conclusion," he said. "They didn't realize the threat she posed, but it was their job to know. They may be underfunded and rushed off their feet, but they're a dangerous people. I don't think enough money goes into mental health services, but that's no excuse, especially when you're dealing with dangerous individuals. I don't feel like I've got closure. I want to change the system. It's my daughter, and it's down to me to make this right." Following the inquest, Mark's lawyer said she twice told doctors that she had lied in her asylum application. She twice told doctors and police that she wanted to go home in 2015 and 2017. And the Home Office offered no explanation as to why they ignored these important clues in her presentation. A Home Office spokesperson said, "We are carefully considering the findings from the inquest and any further recommendations by the coroner." Mark said he has not forgiven Altiona for what she did. I know people say it's good for your mental health to forgive, but in this instance I'm afraid I can't. How dare she touch my daughter? How dare she put her hands on her? So no, I can't forgive her. Altiona Skarner would later appeal her sentence, but this appeal was rejected. Lady Justice McCaw said that there was sufficient evidence to find Altiona knew that what she did was wrong, and attempted to escape detention and escape the scene. Mark said he was more relieved than happy that the appeal was rejected, saying she's a manipulative and dangerous individual, and all three judges saw that today. Altiona Skarner remains at Rampton Hospital, where she's being treated. Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS Trust, who had been responsible for Altiona's care, conducted a review. In a statement they said, "We treat incidents of this kind with the utmost seriousness and completed an internal rigorous review. Whilst this identified learning for our services, the review found there were no markers of deterioration in Ms. Skarner's mental state or behavior, which would have foreseen this tragic event." NHS England disagreed with the Trust's conclusion, saying that it was clear she was unwell and posed a risk to others by 2017. Their report said, "Our most important finding is that the Trust's understanding of risk concepts was poor." Mark later demanded an apology from the Trust, saying that it was absolute nonsense. They are just trying to relinquish all responsibility, and she was their responsibility. They knew she didn't comply with oral medication, but they allowed her to take it on her own volition. That is a ridiculous thing to do. She was a ticking time bomb. I want the horrible story of what happened to my daughter to be told. It's not that I want people to feel sorry for us, but it needs to be told because it's an absolute public outrage. Following Emily's death, her school said they were going to have a memorial set up for her, and more than £11,000 was raised. The head teacher said she was blown away by the support the school had received from the community. Emily's school friends were helping to design a garden in her memory, something that would reflect Emily's love of life in the outdoors, also creating a space for people to go and remember her. Mark teamed up with the charity 100 Families, which supports relatives of those killed by somebody suffering from mental illness, to change the way patients are managed within the community. He said, "Someone said to me, 'What are you trying to achieve from all this?' It's not going to bring Emily back. It's not. But I don't want another family to have to go through what we have been through. I don't want Emily's death to have been in vain." In another fitting tribute to Emily, her mother Sarah launched a GoFundMe to raise money for Bolton Lads and Girls Club with the aim of helping children have support and access to various opportunities. It raised nearly £30,000 and was a truly beautiful way to remember Emily. For her devastated family, and those left behind, life will never be the same. Emily was a bright and kind little girl, with her entire life ahead of her, a life that would have undoubtedly been filled with joy and love, and immense promise. On what was a Sunday that should have been filled with joy and happiness, her life was taken in the most appalling of circumstances, and the aftermath of her death is quite simply devastating. As Mark and Sarah said, Emily was the beat in our hearts, the spring in our step, and the reason we got up every morning. Story 3. Garland, Texas. November 2011. 54-year-old Kelly Martin and her husband Don, like many, were decorating the family home, ready for the festive period. Don was a police officer and Kelly a teacher. They had been together since college and had 2 daughters, Lauren and Caitlin. While grabbing boxes down from the attic, Kelly missed a step on the ladder, tripping and falling. She instantly felt a twinge in her back. The pain was bad, but she got through the holidays hoping it was just a pulled muscle or a trapped nerve and that it would pass. But when it became obvious, it was far more than this. She made a trip to her doctor. This small misstep on the ladder had resulted in a herniated disc in her back. Physical therapy, painkillers, muscle relaxers weren't enough, and eventually her doctor recommended a fantastic neurosurgeon new to the area, Dr. Christopher Dunch. Incredibly well-respected, highly sought after and praised by many of the doctors, it was a no-brainer to pay him a visit. Dr. Dunch put Kelly and Don at ease right away, saying it was no problem at all, a very routine surgery, likely no more than 45 minutes. In fact, it was about the simplest operation a neurosurgeon could perform. He said, "Have you ever had any bad outcomes or deaths on your surgeries?" Kelly asked. He replied, "No, knock on wood." And with this, her surgery was scheduled for March 2012. The day came around, and Don waited patiently in the waiting area. But the 45 minutes drive Don said it would take would soon pass. Then it was an hour, then an hour and a half. It was almost at double the time now, and Don was starting to get worried. He asked one of the nurses to go and check, and about 20 minutes later, Dr. Dunch came out. He said the surgery went well, and Kelly was moving around, but was in a lot of pain, so he upped the medicine. He said she may have to go up to the ICU and stay overnight, but she was going to be okay. Don was told he couldn't go and see his wife as they were still working on her, a phrase that sent a shiver down his spine. Don said something in his gut was telling him it was all off. He called Lauren and Caitlin and said they should come up. 2 hours later, Don and his daughters were still waiting around and panicking. They suddenly saw the ICU physician, Dr. Dunch, and the anesthesiologist walking towards them. The looks on their faces told the story before they even opened their mouths, the words no one wanted to hear. "We did everything we could. Kelly Martin had died. How had such a simple routine operation gone so devastatingly wrong?" Dunch said Dr. Dunch never said a word, not even looking at the three of them. They were told by the ICU physician that it had been a medical miscalculation. Records later showed that during the surgery, her blood pressure had plummeted and she went a gray color. As she regained consciousness after the surgery, she began to hit her legs, which had turned an odd color with splotches on them. Kelly had become so agitated the nurses had to sedate her. She never woke up. Don said it was pure misery. "My world just ended right then and there." He started rocking back and forth, so enraged with emotion, he almost lunged at them. "I knew something was wrong, and I wanted to hurt him," he said of Dr. Dunch. Caitlin said it was like being in slow motion, and as they said their goodbyes to Kelly, Don asked for some scissors, so he could keep a little piece of her hair. They all drove home in silence. The medical examiner confirmed that Kelly had bled to death internally after one of her arteries was completely sliced. Don, Lauren, and Caitlin all had a terrible feeling they weren't getting the full story. Something about Dunch was not sitting well with them and they wanted answers. But what had happened to Kelly Martin was sadly just the beginning, and soon a huge can of worms would start to open. But as always, sometimes you must go backwards slightly to move forwards. Born in 1971 in Montana, Christopher Daniel Dunja had originally set his sights on playing football. One of his teammates remembered him as not being very good at following orders and struggling with the most basic of drills, but someone that came back every practice trying to get it right. He made multiple transfers and moved around so much that he was told this had taken away his eligibility to play professionally. He realized his football dream was over and suddenly made a drastic change. He abruptly switched to a career in medicine. In 1995, he received his undergraduate degree from the University of Memphis before getting his MD there too. He excelled in medical school to such a point that he was allowed to join the Alpha Omega Medical Honor Society and started working with Russian scientists on research programs. Gaining $3 million in funding, started his surgical residency at the University of Tennessee, and was soon running 2 labs. He was described as a charming, smooth-talking, and witty guy with a glowing 12-page resume. He had many people speaking highly of him and seeking him out. But despite all of his successes and accolades, things were slowly starting to unravel, and it was becoming clear that all was not as it appeared. His resume boasted that he had earned a doctorate in microbiology from the prestigious St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, but there was no such program running at the hospital at that time. He also claimed to have gotten his PhD from the University of Tennessee Health Center, but he appears in no yearbooks from the university during that period. The school declined to verify his claims, citing a federal privacy law. Since college, he had been a drug user and a big drinker, but during his residency was when his drug use started to escalate. He was frequently taking LSD, cocaine, and illegally getting his hands on prescription painkillers. His ex-girlfriend Megan initially thought that this was just something he did occasionally, but it was clearly not the case. After a full night of drug taking, drinking vodka, and no sleep, Megan said he grabbed his scrubs and walked into work ready to talk to patients. She was horrified. His choice of drug was cocaine, although when he would come down after binges, he would rely on OxyContin, Xanax, and alcohol. Many said he would start his days off with a vodka, an orange juice, and a line of cocaine. One of his friends would later talk about just how out of control his drug use was, and several nurses said they saw him taking cocaine right before he went into surgery. But Dunt joked about it, calling them his neurostimulants, believing it made him better and more alert in theater. There has been LSD, there has been cocaine, there has been pills. How long did this drug party go on that night? All night to the next day. Until the sun came up. Well, beyond the sun came up because Chris had to go to work the next day, and he went. After he was reported, he was asked to take a drugs test, which he refused to do. He was subsequently sent to an impaired physician program. In a deposition, slurring and not really concentrating, Dunch pleaded the fifth over and over again when asked about using drugs whilst working with patients. Have you ever been under the influence of cocaine while you were taking care of a patient? I take the fifth. I take the fifth. I take the fifth. Despite the complaints, refusal to participate in tests, and after completing less than 100 surgeries, whereas it is typical for a resident to perform closer to 1,000, he was still allowed to finish his residency. In 2011, he was headhunted to join the Minimally Invasive Spine Institute in North Dallas with a $600,000 advance. Not long after, he was given surgical rights at the Baylor Regional Medical Center in Plano. On a $50,000 a month salary. The recommendation that landed him the job had read, "Chris is extremely bright and possibly the hardest working person I have ever met," adding he had an excellent work ethic. For hospitals, surgeons are worth millions in revenue, on average about $2.5 million per year, and it is not uncommon to get operating privileges at other hospitals, hence the reason Dunch was able to get a string of these across Dallas. Only a couple of months after he had finished his training, Dunch met another surgeon called Dr. Randall Kirby, a man that would play a key role in this story. Kirby said the first conversation he had with Dunch revolved around him telling him he was the best surgeon in Dallas and the only one a patient could trust. He said he wanted to clean the town up and was quite aggressive with his delivery. Kirby was taken aback with his level of arrogance, knowing how new he was to this game. Other doctors saw the same outbursts but put his cockiness down to the fact he was just a really talented surgeon. And he knew it. Opinions soon changed, however, when the only surgery he actually performed at the Minimally Invasive Spine Institute resulted in him being asked to leave. After the surgery was done, he immediately went on a trip to Las Vegas to party, and left no one to look after his distressed patient. His drug use wasn't slowing down, and he would write many long emails to another ex-girlfriend and his surgical assistant Kimberly saying some very unhinged things, likely due to intoxication. One email read in part, "I really am building an empire. Anyone close to me thinks that I likely am something between God, Einstein, and the Antichrist, because how can I do everything I want and cross every discipline boundary like it's a playground and never lose? I am ready to leave the love and kindness and good and patience that I mix with everything else that I am and become a cold-blooded killer." In more emails he referenced his drug and alcohol abuse. These emails were full of swearing, threats, and rambling in abusive language. The emails themselves are too long to read in full, but they are interesting and present a small insight into his mind, so we have linked them in the description box if anyone wants to take a closer look. In December 2011, shortly before Kelly Martin approached him, Christopher had operated twice on a man called Ken Fennell. He was his first patient in North Texas. The surgery didn't help fix his back pain, as Dunch had operated in the wrong area, a mistake he admitted, but one he said he would correct with a second surgery. Ken, desperate to fix his pain, agreed. When Ken woke up the second time around, he described his legs as like a bonfire burning him. Something had gone wrong during the second surgery, but he had no idea what, and he left hospital relying heavily on a motorized wheelchair from that point on. Dunch's next patient was Lee Passmore, and he was actually an investigator in the Collin County Medical Examiner's office. He had undergone back surgery once before, but his pain had come back. Without missing a beat, Lee's pain specialist recommended Dr. Dunch. The surgery was booked right away. A vascular surgeon called Mark Hoyle assisted with the operation. Dr. Hoyle watched in horror as Dunch began to cut out a ligament around the spinal cord that should never have been touched. Right away, Lee started bleeding so profusely. Hoyle said the operating room was like a lake of red. Dunch not only left some hardware in Lee's spine, he also stripped the screw, so it could not be moved. Unable to watch anymore, Dr. Hoyle said he blocked the incision area to try and stop Dunja from carrying on. "We need to talk about this," he said, locking eyes with Dunja. "That's dangerous. Even that attitude is dangerous. I've done 5,000 of these, and I've never seen this done before. For the arrogant and careless surgeon, it was not enough to stop him. Hoyle said he left the operating room and vowed to never work with the surgeon ever again. Lee Passmore did survive the ordeal, but lives with chronic pain and has a lot of trouble walking and balancing. The next patient to have his life irreparably changed was Barry Morgulov. Spending his life unloading trucks, his back was now in pain all the time. The only recommendation he got was Dr. Dunch, but Barry wasn't sure, nervous about getting surgery, and he spent hours poring over reviews about him and all his awards and accolades. Barry set up a meeting with the surgeon and clicked with him right away. He said he felt calm seeing how confident Dr. Dunch was. He said he was a very charming and disarming guy, a loving family man it seemed. Phenomenal, great guy, loved him, Barry said. In January 2012, Barry was wheeled into surgery. The vascular surgeon assisting Dunch was none other than Dr. Randall Kirby. Dr. Kirby said of the operation, "In the spectrum of what a neurosurgeon does for a living, doing this procedure is probably the easiest thing that they do on a daily basis." Kirby watched as Dunch went right in without using the proper tools, grabbing at things that he shouldn't have been, and haphazardly blundering around. Kirby argued with Dunch before changing tack and politely offering to take over the surgery, but Dunch insisted he knew what he was doing. Kirby left, but he was unable to shake this feeling that he had about Dunch, and had had since the day he first met him. Barry woke up from the surgery in agony, a pain unlike anything he'd felt before. It would turn out that there were bone fragments that had been left in Barry's spinal canal. Another surgeon would later try and repair the damage, but Barry has to walk with a cane now, and his doctor said one day he will end up in a wheelchair. At one point, Barry was so depressed and sick that he contemplated taking his own life, believing it was the only way the mental and physical pain would end. Fortunately, his wife and children were able to pull him out of the dark place, and he began some intensive therapy. Dunch's childhood friend, and now roommate Jerry Summers, then approached him to perform a surgery on his back too. He had a herniated disc. The pair would often go out partying together, and Jerry even had access to Dunch's credit cards. To ask his good friend to do this simple surgery seemed like a given. The trust was already there, and Dunge was often talking about how highly in demand he was. But for Jerry, the dream situation would quickly turn into a nightmare. In surgery, he damaged Jerry's vertebral artery, and the bleeding just wasn't stopping. 2 liters of blood was soon lost. Dunge packed the area with so much anticoagulant that it squeezed Jerry's spine. When Jerry woke up, he said he couldn't feel anything. He had no sensation in either of his arms or legs, and was now completely paralyzed and would later require 24/7 round-the-clock care. Lying in the ICU, knowing that he was never going to recover, he turned to his girlfriend and said, "Kill me. I want to die." Dunch never once came to see his friend, see how he was, or even explain what had happened. In a depressed rage, Jerry told the nurses that Dunch had been taking cocaine the night before he performed the surgery. He later admitted he had just made this up, but knowing his friend and his drug usage, he felt it was a fairly educated assumption. His claim was taken seriously, and Dunch was ordered to take a drugs test. The test would never happen, as Dunch claimed he got lost on his way there. He did pass a separate psychological evaluation, and just 3 weeks later, he was allowed to start operating again, but was instructed to stick to minor procedures. But after this, we come back to Kelly Martin's case. She would be his next patient. After Kelly died, officials ordered Dunch to take another drug test. This time he took it. The first screening came back as showing it had been diluted with water, and the second, a few days later, was clean. Some while later, Lee, still struggling to work, was allowed to resign from his job at the Collin County Medical Examiner's office. But before he left, a fax came through that stopped him in his tracks. There were 2 names at the top of the first page, Kelly Martin and Dr. Christopher Dunch. He sat and read what happened to her, shocked at what he was seeing. The cog started turning as he connected the dots between that and his own botched surgery. He went down a rabbit hole and found a few months that were not accounted for in Dunch's educational history. He said you don't get to walk away from 2 to 3 years of medical training in the middle of an internship or a residency. Get to take time off and be slotted directly in the position you left in with no questions asked. Maybe that's how they do it in Tennessee, but according to my training, that's not how they do it here. Then it all just started to unravel. Administrators at the hospital put together a comprehensive review of all of Dunite's cases, and each time the same thing had happened. Patterns were showing, and other surgeons were talking. Now someone was dead. This could not be ignored. After going through everything that had happened in that particular hospital alone, they determined he couldn't continue there. To the shock of the other surgeons and patients, the hospital did not fire him. Instead, they asked him to resign, remaining in good standing, with his last day being in April 2012. Through a letter, Baylor Plano said, "All areas of concern with regard to Christopher D. Dunch have been closed. As of this date, there have been no summary or administrative restrictions or suspension of Dunch's medical staff membership or clinical privileges during the time he has practiced at Baylor Regional Medical Center at Plano." The places that had asked him to leave chose to avoid the legalities of a potential wrongful termination and bad press of firing such a highly respected doctor, and instead let him quietly resign and move on with no repercussions. And as he technically left of his own choice, this meant that at least 2 facilities did not have to report him to a database run by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This database is supposed to log information about problem practitioners, warning potential employers about their histories. They also failed to report him to the Texas Medical Board. When some of his patients tried to sue him for malpractice, most of them found it virtually impossible to find attorneys willing to take on their cases. In 2003, Texas enacted tort reform, which reduced the amount of damages plaintiffs could win, with the number of malpractice payouts per year dropping by more than half. In July 2012, Dunch moved right on to the Dallas Medical Center. The background check they briefly ran on him came back clean. In the same month he joined, Dunch operated on 63-year-old Floyla Brown, a banker looking forward to retirement. About 30 minutes into the surgery, the bleeding was so bad that Dunch said he couldn't see her spine. "Why is it still bleeding?" he kept saying. After a few scary moments, it seemed Dunch had got it under control, but nurses in the room were concerned. Although Floella woke up and seemed fine, early the following morning she lost consciousness as pressure was building up inside her brain for reasons that no one could work out. She was in critical condition, and it wasn't looking good. While Floella lay in the intensive care unit, with doctors fighting to save her life, Dunch was set to go into another surgery with 71-year-old Mariah Ford. Mary was very active and loved working out, but back pain was stopping her from living her life. The surgery was very simple, easily mastered by most first-year residents. Before the surgery started, nurses spotted a hole in Dunch's scrubs right at the back, showing he wasn't wearing underwear. One nurse, Kyle Kissinger, said he had seen the same hole for 3 straight days, and it was clear that Dunch wasn't even changing his scrubs between surgeries. As he stared into Dunch's eyes, he said he had pinpoint pupils and wasn't blinking. It was all very alarming. The surgery for Dunch was more of the same. The operating room staff questioned why he seemed to be drilling into random areas of her back, carelessly and without paying any attention. Soon after the surgery on Mary started, Dunch turned to Kyle and said he wanted to perform a procedure on Floella called a craniotomy. This involves cutting a hole in the skull to relieve pressure on the brain. Kyle was shocked and said Dallas Medical Center did not perform these, as they didn't have the proper equipment to be able to. Other people in the operating room with him were terrified, but unfortunately, he backed down. Floella was moved to another hospital, but she never regained consciousness, and her family withdrew her life support a few days later. A neurosurgeon was hired to review her case and death, and would later conclude that Dunch had both pierced and blocked her vertebral artery with a misplaced screw. He also found that he had misdiagnosed the source of her pain in the first place, and was operating in totally the wrong area. This had triggered a stroke which had ultimately claimed her life. Maria Ford woke up from the surgery, the same as the others before her, in total agony. She couldn't move her legs or feel her toes. Dr. Robert Henderson, another important person in this story, was called in to look at her case. He was an extremely talented Dallas spinal surgeon with 3 decades of experience. He pulled up her post-op x-rays, and first thing he said was, some kind of travesty occurred. Mary was pulled back into surgery the next day, with Dr. Henderson operating. There were 3 holes in Mary's spinal column, where Dunch had tried and failed to insert several screws. One screw had hit the nerves that control one leg and the bladder. Dr. Henderson then discovered that Dunch had amputated on one of her nerve roots, for reasons Henderson called inexplicable. The surgery had gone so badly and was so botched. Dr. Henderson wondered if Dunch was some sort of imposter, dressing up and pretending to be a surgeon. He could think of no other reason why this had gone so wrong. Maria Ford now relies on a wheelchair. She has never regained mobility in her legs. She said one of her biggest loves was sewing. She used to do it all the time, but as she can't pick up her foot, she can't do this anymore. Pain is really my life, she said. Dr. Henderson was horrified and took his findings to the hospital administrators, and he and Dr. Kirby both started sharing stories. Dr. Kirby had operating privileges at over 60 hospitals across Texas, and wherever he went, someone at some point would come up to him with a story about Dr. Dunch. Thanks to the fuss the pair kicked up, hospital officials told Dunch he would no longer be able to operate at Dallas Medical Center. However, yet again, he wasn't fired or suspended. He was allowed to leave quietly. People were going in for the most simple, routine and standard surgeries and procedures, and they were coming out worse than they went in. And in the case of Kelly Martin and Floella Brown, they weren't coming out at all. It had taken months and multiple catastrophic and fatal surgeries, but finally Dr. Dunch was reported to the state medical board. However, this was not the simple fix surgeons like Dr. Henderson and Dr. Kirby thought. It would take almost a whole year for the board to investigate. All the while Dunch was operating elsewhere. Things went quiet for a little while, until December 2012. Dr. Kirby was asked to assist with a woman called Jacqueline Troy. She had had neck surgery and was now battling a severe infection. Dr. Kirby found that the surgeon who had operated on her had cut her vocal cords and one of her arteries. "Is it a guy named Christopher Dunch?" he asked. He knew the answer already, and of course the answer was yes. Dunch was finally reported to the National Practitioner Data Bank, but even after the report was filed, Dr. Kirby found that another hospital had given him operating privileges. Although Dunch didn't realize this, Jeff Glidwell would be his last patient. Jeff, always an outdoors-loving man, had had a motorbike accident years before, and his back and neck had never been the same. He had come across Dunch in an advert that was showing the best neurosurgeons in the Dallas area. "It's a call that's telling me it's a need to make a difference, and hi again, everyone. Jim Knox along with Candace Kruger, and welcome back to another edition of the Best Docs Network, which of course features some of the best doctors in Dallas-Fort Worth area. Dr. Christopher Dunch calls himself the best neurosurgeon in all of Dallas. He specializes in relieving back and neck pain. Then they come back to me to discuss surgical options." Despite everything going wrong for Dunch's patients, it seemed he was still the talk of the town. As a superstitious man, Jeff saw 3 black cats on the way into the hospital and said his gut told him to turn around. Reassured by his wife, they carried on for the surgery. Hours later, Dunja was nowhere to be found. 3 hours after the surgery was supposed to start, Dunch finally turned up in a cab claiming he had a flat tire. His jeans were frayed, he was sweaty and disheveled, and Jeff said he didn't look at all ready for the surgery. His bad feeling grew, but he kissed his wife goodbye and went into the operating room. At this point, unbeknownst to Jeff, the state medical board had been investigating Dunch for 10 months. During the surgery, Dunch thought that part of Jeff's neck muscle was a tumor and stopped operating on him halfway through. He cut into Jeff's vocal cords, punctured an artery, and cut a hole in his esophagus. Dunch used a sponge to stop the bleeding and stitched Jeff back up with the sponge still inside him. Dunch came out and told Jeff's wife Robin he had found a tumor confirmed by a quick biopsy, and therefore he couldn't possibly carry on. But there was no tumor, and there had been no biopsy. Robin went in to see Jeff in the recovery room. Jeff was so distressed he couldn't swallow and breathlessly mumbled, "Where's the doctor? I can't move my arm or my leg. Something's wrong. What did he do to me?" Dunch finally showed his face, and Jeff, now battling an infection as well, said, "I can't move my arms." Dunch replied, "Well, I don't know what to tell you about that." Before strolling off, none other than Dr. Randall Kirby was called in to correct the damage, and at this point, he was quite literally losing his mind. How did this keep happening, and when was it going to end? On a scale of difficulty, this was about a 2 out of 10 procedure. He said this was not an operation that was performed, this was attempted murder. It was like a crazed maniac procedure. Dr. Kirby went directly to the Texas Medical Board, and Robin went to the police. The officer she spoke to said they didn't have the resources to file criminal charges against the doctor. She went back to Dr. Kirby, asking if she could contact the medical board too. and a statement was drafted. Jeff Glidwell would leave the hospital months later, partially paralyzed and with only one vocal cord. He has nerve damage in one arm and can only eat small bites of food at a time. But Dunch would again move elsewhere. In May 2013, Dr. Henderson and Dr. Kirby opened up their emails to find an invite to a Meet the New Specialist dinner. University General Hospital was throwing an event to welcome a new neurosurgeon joining their team, Dr. Christopher Dunch. They simply couldn't believe it. This was Dunch's third hospital in 18 months. Dr. Kirby said he picked up the phone right away and called the hospital to, in his words, raise holy hell. He then sent them a 6-page letter, which read in part, "Let me be blunt. Christopher Dunch, Texas Medical Board license number N8183, is an impaired physician, a sociopath, and must be stopped from practicing medicine." In the letter, Kirby told the hospital they could either address it and do something about it, or he would be calling every media outlet in Texas. With so much talk in the medical community and between family members, the stories were traveling fast. An article was published about him online referring to him as Dr. Death and quoted Dr. Kirby and all of his findings. Dunch took to the comment section to threaten Dr. Kirby if he kept talking. But in this case, there was no such thing as bad publicity, because finally in June 2013, Christopher Dunch was suspended and ordered to stop operating. A Plano neurosurgeon has his license suspended after the medical board says his negligence resulted in at least 2 patient deaths. Patients tried to get their medical records from Dr. Christopher Dunch's office today, but they were turned away. Well, Clarice, those frustrated patients were told by somebody on Dr. Dunch's staff to show up here at his office between 4 and 5 o'clock this afternoon to pick up those medical records. Well, those patients showed up, but as you mentioned, they didn't walk away with anything. And so far we know that 2 lawsuits have been filed, and at least 3 more are on the way. Carol McMillan, out of luck at Dr. Dunch's office at the Texas Neurological Institute in Plano. Dr. Dunch, as seen here on Facebook, was scheduled to perform surgery on her tomorrow. On Wednesday, the Texas Medical Board issued a temporary suspension order of Dunch's license because of imminent peril to public health and cited impairment by drugs or alcohol. Maria Ford claims in her lawsuit she has permanent nerve damage because of Dr. Dunch's negligence. Despite being on the maximum amount of narcotics that she prayed to God to take her every single day, she cried every single day. 54-year-old Kelly Martin, mother of 2, and wife of a Garland police officer, from massive bleeding, and is patient number 2 cited in the suspension order. Dunch has had surgical privileges at several North Texas hospitals, but most recently had them revoked at University General Hospital in Dallas. A temporary suspension really doesn't refer to any specific time frame. It's more of a move that is done fairly quickly by the board when they feel that there is some sort of imminent threat posed by a doctor. I was told that the doctor will have a chance at some point to defend himself before the board, but that would likely happen over a series of hearings. It could take several weeks, or even longer. Clarice Natalie Solis lived tonight in Plano. Thank you. Dunch was able to issue some sort of appeal through a lawyer and said he didn't have the time to use drugs or drink even if he wanted to because he was too busy. He said he was a hard worker, and he even threatened to sue Dr. Kirby for slander. He claimed he was at the center of a vast conspiracy to bilk money from the hospitals where he practiced. When asked why it had taken so long for the suspension to happen, the head of the medical board said at the time, "It's not uncommon for there to be complications in neurosurgery. None of us rush to judgment that's not fair, and in the long run it can come back to be incorrect. To suspend a physician's license, there has to be a pattern of patient injury." So that was ultimately what happened, but it took until June of 2013 to get that established, he added. Can you explain then what happened during those surgeries, please, sir? I talked to a doctor who said that you were like a serial killer. Do you have a response? Yes, I'll deal with that in a context of libel later when I've defended myself. Are you planning to try to practice medicine again? Yes. For Doctors Henderson and Kirby, it wasn't good enough. Dr. Henderson said the word suspended implied he might be allowed back at some point, and they couldn't let that happen. Dr. Kirby, Dr. Henderson, and another doctor contacted the district attorney arguing that Dunch was a criminal. They got a meeting but nothing happened. In December 2013, almost 2 years since Kelly Martin had died, the medical board permanently revoked Dunch's license. Despite his huge salary, Dunch was now in dire straits financially. He had to file for bankruptcy, owing more than $1 million, and leave Texas, moving in with his parents in Colorado. He would come back and forth to see his 2 young sons, but it appeared the relationship with his girlfriend Wendy had fallen apart too. A month after moving, he was pulled over by police in the early morning hours. He was driving on the wrong side of the road with 2 flat tires. As soon as they spoke to him, the smell of alcohol was strong, and empty bottles littered the car floor. Dunch was arrested for a DUI and ordered into rehab. In March 2014, police were called in again to a bank in Dallas after people saw a man with blood on his hands and face banging on the doors and trying to get in. It was Dunch. He was wearing his scrubs and was incoherent, saying something about his family being in danger. He was swiftly taken to a psychiatric hospital. After his father had sent him some money, he was caught in a Dallas Walmart filling a cart with almost $1,000 of watches, sunglasses, computer equipment, and cologne. He bagged them up to hide them before picking out some clothes and putting them on in the dressing room. He then headed right for the door but was stopped by security and arrested for shoplifting. His life was out of control, and the wheels were starting to come off. Later that year, Bella Plano was told a lawsuit had been lodged against them by Ken Fennell and Lee Passmore, swiftly followed by Maria Ford and Barry Mergeloff. Bella Plano described this as extremely frustrating and difficult, adding that a lot of what had been said about them was misleading, and that they never knowingly allowed one person to compromise the level of quality care they pride themselves on. Jeff Glidewell, still fighting to accept his life was now what it was, but still wanting justice, made a call to a judge with everything he knew about Dungy. This would finally help bring the case back to the district attorney's attention and get the ball moving. We now meet someone else vital in bringing this case to a conclusion, Michelle Sugart, the assistant district attorney. The case instantly piqued her interest, as in her 13 years with the Dallas DA's office, she had never prosecuted a doctor. In fact, from looking at other cases like this, it seemed that no one had ever prosecuted a surgeon for what they had done in the operating room. It would become a case of firsts for many reasons. She began researching everything she could on Dosh, and it was staggering just how much was out there about him. Can you explain then what happened during those surgeries? She issued subpoenas and spoke to over 100 people in person. In July 2015, 46-year-old Christopher Dunch was arrested on 5 aggravated assault charges, 1 count of injury to an elderly person, Maria Ford. He was also accused of maiming 3 patients and causing the deaths of at least 2. A North Texas doctor charged for what happened in his operating room during surgery. Dr. Christopher Dunch is a neurosurgeon and now faces charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, his scalpel. Dunch is accused of butchering patients and botching surgeries of 5 Dallas area patients who either died or are now scarred for life. News 8's Brett Schiff was among the first to expose these allegations, and you're joining us with the latest. That's right, Shelley. We first revealed the allegations against Dr. Dunch in 2013 of case after case of botched surgeries, of alleged drug abuse and reckless indifference toward his patients who will now try to help put him behind bars. Victims and their attorneys say Dunch was building a resume of alleged botched surgeries of paralyzed patients and in 2 cases death. While Dunch was operating on Lee Passmore of Frisco, an assisting surgeon had to intervene. Jim Gerarts is Passmore's attorney. Dr. Dunch had to be physically restrained by the surgeon that was operating with him, because that second surgeon recognized that Dunch was doing things that were not explainable, that were extremely dangerous. Other patients have similar stories. DeKnight's former roommate, Jerry Summers, will never walk again. Hospital staff knew that Dr. Dunch had a gallon jug of vodka under his desk, that a baggie of white powder had been found in his bathroom. DeKnight's remains behind bars tonight on $600,000 bond. He was taken into custody and denied all the allegations. He was officially charged and pleaded not guilty. In Texas, the charge of injury to an elderly person carries a potential life sentence. But there were only 4 months left before the statute of limitations ran out. This was the big charge they were pushing to take to trial. As for various reasons, if they could obtain a conviction for this, it would be worth more in terms of years than any of the other charges. One lawyer said, "It's not worth an attorney's time and energy to take on a malpractice case. The outcome, sadly, would just not be worth it." The prosecution knew this was a tough case, but their goal was to get a sentence long enough to ensure he would never be able to practice medicine again. To the relief of the prosecution, Dunch was criminally charged in the maiming of Mariah Ford, and this was the charge that went to trial. Former neurosurgeon, who was once a rising star in his medical field, is now in jail on felony charges. Fox 4's Natalie Solis tells us how the malpractice claims against him became an investigation. Christopher Dunch on Facebook, when he had a thriving medical practice.
Cam Dunch. Tuesday. Just a few years later, booked into the Dallas County Jail. James Gerards represents one of Dunch's former patients who sued the former neurosurgeon in civil court after a botched surgery. It is so rare for a district attorney to prosecute a physician. Dallas police picked him up Tuesday afternoon on the assault charges near a Richardson motel. Typically, when a physician is targeted for a criminal prosecution, the industry rallies around that physician. For that reason,
it's a real gut check for a district attorney to indict a physician for something that he was doing professionally. But Dunch stands out. This one is so egregious that the information just couldn't be controlled. Well, since 2013, Dunch has been back and forth between Dallas and Colorado, where he was put on probation for DWI. But it appears Dunch does not have legal representation so far for these latest charges. Now, we did put in a request to do a jailhouse interview to get his side of the story. We have not gotten a response. Well, we're hearing this trial could last several weeks. It actually presents a lot of interesting legal questions. Can a botched surgery rise to the level, be more than just malpractice? Can it rise to the level of a criminal act? And that's something this jury will have to answer. Dunch opted not to testify in his own defense, despite the fact they were only focused on Mary's case. They still had a huge amount of people that were willing to testify against him to prove his negligence in the years before he even met Mary. DRS Randall and Henderson took to the stand, as did Jerry via a video link from his home. Mary herself also testified. What are we looking at here in State's Exhibit 4? My back. The scar on my back. I could not move my feet and legs, and my thoughts was something is wrong. I've never had pain like that before. It was a 10 plus. I said he will never touch me again. The prosecution said it was obvious he had intentionally, knowingly and recklessly harmed up to 15 of his patients, although we know there were many more people affected. Jeff Cheney woke up from his operation to find out that Dunch had removed part of his spinal cord by mistake, paralyzing the entire right side of his body. Jackie Troy found herself unable to talk as Dunch had paralyzed her vocal cords. Philip Mayfield paralyzed from the neck down. Marshall Muse spiraled into addiction after relying on pain pills following his surgery, and Pam Trusty feels lucky to be alive. However, Dunch's legal team claimed that he was not a criminal, just a lousy surgeon and a lazy person. He didn't know he was risking anything. It was careless. It was wrong. But it's not to the level of criminal. They said him committing malpractice was due to chaotic operating rooms and hospitals in Dallas. And as for the emails he wrote to his ex-girlfriend Kimberly saying he would become a killer, they said it was simply sarcasm taken badly. The jury in the Dr. Christopher Dunch case will hear closing statements tomorrow. Defense attorneys sought to portray him as an inexperienced, poorly trained surgeon. Is it fair for Christopher Dunch, who was enabled to do these surgeries, who couldn't have done it without the help of all these big hospitals, all these other doctors? Is it right for him to go away, to be thrown away when all of them profited? All of them have blood on their hands. The only way that this happens is that the entire system fails the patients. Again, there are multiple things that have to occur in order for us to be here. The carnage he caused was not a mistake or an accident. He did virtually everything wrong. So to be able to do that much wrong, I felt that he must have known at some point in time how to do it right. It was that egregious. Did he follow the Hippocratic Oath? Its major tenet, first do no harm. He certainly didn't. Dr. Robert Henderson testified he was called in to try to correct Dunch's surgery, calling a Ford's case an atrocity, and questioned Dunch's qualifications. I became concerned whether or not he was a physician and was a surgeon. Dunch's attorneys agree he made mistakes. They just say prosecutors can't prove it was knowing, reckless, or intentional. Even his lead attorney said, "You have people in walkers. You have people on crutches. You have people that could barely move. You have people that had lost loved ones. You had all sorts of things that had gone wrong." Before we even get to Mary, you can see that it's going downhill. It's going downhill fast. So why didn't he stop? Michelle asked. Because of greed. Because he owed people a lot of money. He wanted to live the high life, and a neurosurgeon makes big bucks. Why didn't he stop? Because he had no conscience. He doesn't care what he has left in his wake. In court, Dungy was calm and collected. His lawyer later said he truly and honestly thought he was doing a good job, and this all seemed shocking to him. He said until the expert started speaking, it seemed he was clueless as to the damage he caused. This is not providing any stability at all. There's bone fragments just laying over the exposed dura here on the left side. The jury took just 4 hours to return their verdicts, when the jury unanimously decided that Christopher Daniel was guilty. In July 2016, he was found guilty of 1 count of intentionally or knowingly causing serious bodily harm to an elderly individual. Dunch's family begged for some mercy when it came to the sentencing. They described him as a bright little boy who had taken care of sick birds and loved dogs. They acknowledged his issues but said everything he did came from a place of wanting to help people. His dad, Don, said he's been devastated. He is nothing. He's lost everything. He doesn't have his family. He doesn't have his career. He doesn't have his companies. He doesn't have his medical license. I think what happened is that as things begin to fall apart, the only thing he knew was to try harder. Jury, having found the defendant, Christopher Daniel Dunch, guilty of injury to an elderly individual, has charged the indictment, unanimously assess his punishment, confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for life. In February 2017, Christopher Dunch was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 30 years. 6 o'clock, a former North Texas doctor learning that he will spend the rest of his life in prison, and so we're overwhelmed. And this is my daughter, and this is a voice for Kelly, and we're so thankful, and hopefully we can move on with our life. I'm just so grateful from the bottom of my heart. This will not bring my mother back, but it is some sense of justice. This is what I wanted. This is what I've waited 4.5 years for. He believed that everyone else was just humans, and this was his playground, and he could build anything, sell anything, ruin anything, and he would not suffer the consequences. We are so elated about the life sentence that has been handed down in this case today. There have been other filings from other patients against Dinesh, but we hear from the district attorney's office tonight that they do not plan to seek any criminal charges from those cases at this point. As for Dinesh and his legal team, they did make it clear today that they plan to appeal. He filed an appeal in 2018, but his conviction was upheld. He's not eligible for parole until 2045, when he will be 74 years old. This case set a huge precedent. It is the first time in the United States that a physician has been convicted of criminal charges for actions in the course of their medical work. In June 2023, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill into law that would give the state's medical board additional ability to protect patients from potentially dangerous doctors. The bill, HB 1998, was introduced in response to an investigation that found at least 49 doctors were practicing in Texas, despite having their licenses revoked in other states. To think about how many people these doctors were treating is shocking. There was no record of these actions on the Texas Medical Board's physician profile pages, despite being required by law. The new law includes several provisions which will better enable the board to protect patients and boost transparency. These include some of the following. Lying on a medical license application will be a Class A misdemeanor. Doctors who have had their medical licenses revoked, restricted, or suspended in another state will not be allowed to practice in Texas. All doctors will be required to be fingerprinted as part of a criminal background check and be monitored monthly via the National Practitioner Databank. The 4 hospitals that employ Dinesh have ongoing civil cases against them as well. Sadly, not reporting these things is not uncommon. In 2011, a staggering 47% of hospitals did not report their restrictions or revocations of doctors' clinical privileges, leaving the doors wide open for the lack of paper trail to be taken advantage of. Questions had to be answered, and accountability had to be taken. It highlighted the systemic problems within the healthcare field all the way to the top. The hospital officials, which allowed him to leave rather than firing him and having him investigated, issued a statement which read, "Our primary concern, as always, is with patients. Out of respect for the patients and families involved, and the privileged nature of a number of details, we must continue to limit our comments. There is nothing more important to us than serving our community through high-quality, trusted healthcare. Trying to comprehend the amount of damage and destruction that Christopher Dunch has caused is impossible." Between May 2011 and June 2013, Dinach performed surgery on 38 people. 32 of them were left with life-changing injuries, in some cases completely paralyzed, and 2 had died. His case became quite a big part of mainstream media, with a hugely successful podcast being launched about it, and it was even made into a TV show on Peacock called Dr. Death. Good morning, I'm Dr. Christopher Dinach. Patient presented with severe back pain, diagnosed as a herniated disc. It is important we are in and out with as little fanfare as possible. It was an all-star cast, with Joshua Jackson playing Donche and Christian Slater playing Dr. Randall Kirby. And this brings us to the amazing doctors that helped put an end to his career. One has to wonder if it wasn't for the perseverance of Dr. Kirby and Dr. Henderson, how much longer would Donche have continued? Tragically, a third victim's life would be claimed when, in 2021, Jerry Summers, Dunch's patient and once dear friend, died from an infection connected to his botched surgery. We trust that when we need them, people in Christopher Dunch's position of authority, knowledge and power will look after us. They will care for us. They will make us better. We put our faith and trust in them, that they will turn things around even when the odds might seem stacked against us. We hope that we are in good and safe hands. For the families that were affected by the crimes of Christopher Dunch's Unsolved, that trust will likely forever be broken. Kelly's husband Don Martin said, "My whole lifestyle has changed. Everything is different now. I look at life differently, totally differently. Life is too precious, too short. We can't take the little things for granted." Story 4. Friday, November 25th, 2022. Thanksgiving weekend. Riverside, California, a small cul-de-sac in Price Court. It was a quiet morning that Friday. Most families were still asleep, having enjoyed great food and company the previous evening Thanksgiving. The weekend for most would be more of the same, eating well, relaxing and spending time together. Just before 7 a.m., a red Kia Soul parks up in the area, and a man wearing a tan-colored trench coat, a black fedora and face mask, carrying a black duffel bag and a plastic bag gets out. He walks around the area for a while, standing outside a house for a moment, before going back to the car and driving off. He does the same thing twice. One of the neighbors thought it looked so weird. She called the Riverside Police's non-emergency line to report the license plate, but whoever it was hadn't actually done anything, so all they could do was make a note of it. 2 hours later, 9 a.m., Michelle Blandon was just on her way out of the house when she got a call from her mother, Sherry. Sherry was panicked and talking fast. She said that a detective was in the house and wanting to talk to her 15-year-old granddaughter, Michelle's niece. He said something had happened near the school, and it was very urgent that he get hold of her. 65-year-old Sherry lived in the home with her husband, 69-year-old Mark, a volunteer high school softball and baseball coach, her daughter, 38-year-old Brooke, and Brooke's 2 young girls. Everyone's minds were racing. Had the team done something wrong? Was she in trouble? Was he going to take her to the station? Sherry said it was just her and Mark in the house as Brooke had taken her girls out. The officer said he would have to wait until they came home and interview everyone separately. It seemed really serious. Michelle was baffled and worried, but reassured her mother it was probably nothing, and to try and stay calm. Sherry asked the detective if it was okay for Brooke's other daughter to get dropped off at Michelle's house while they sorted everything out, and he agreed. All everyone could do was wait until the teen came home with Brooke. The detective told Sherry that he needed to talk to the adults first, and the teen would have to wait in the car once she got there, along with both hers and Brooke's phones. Michelle's heart started to beat fast, and the anxious feeling she had was growing. None of this felt right or normal, not even close, but Michelle knew her mom wouldn't have opened the door for anyone, let alone let someone in. He was an officer, he had a badge, and the authority to go in, and everything would be fine. A few minutes later, Brooke arrived at her house to drop off her niece, and Michelle watched as Brooke and her 15-year-old daughter drove off to Price Court. Michelle called Sherry back and said they were on their way over, and asked if everything was okay. Sherry's voice was shaky, and she was fighting back tears. She said the detective was still in the house, but before she could say anything else, he took the phone off her. Calming and reassuring, he said, "I'm here with your mom. She is kind of being anxious and freaking out. Everything is going to be okay. It's all okay." He passed the phone back over, and Michelle strained to hear what was being said. She heard the detective say as part of the investigation that he needed to search the teen's room. The room with the Green Bay Packers memorabilia, he said. Michelle felt sick. How on earth did he know what the inside of her family's house looked like? But before she could say anything to her mother, Sherry said, "I'll call you back," and the line went dead. There was nothing Michelle could do but wait, so she tried to shake it off and headed out into town. Brooke finally pulled up and went inside, her daughter staying in the car as per the officer's instructions. A short while later, Michelle sent a text to her mom asking for an update. She got no reply. 11:08 a.m. 911 dispatchers received a call requesting that a welfare check be carried out at Price Court. A couple of residents were concerned as they had watched a man leaving a house with a much younger girl. She was very distressed. She had no shoes on and was subtly trying to mouth words at people watching, although they couldn't tell what she was trying to communicate. The pair walked towards a red Kia Soul, which was parked on someone's drive. The same person's drive, in fact, that had reported the car's license plates just a few hours earlier. As the pair approached the car, the owner of the house opened the door and shouted at the man that he couldn't park there. The man was very apologetic and said he was leaving. He opened the back passenger side door, and the girl got inside. He then walked around to the back door on the driver's side and put the black duffel bag inside. As he turned around, the neighbor saw some red spots on his clothes, which looked like blood, but she couldn't be sure. Although the girl wasn't physically forced into the car, something was very troubling about the situation. Before the man shut the doors, the girl quietly whispered, "Help me," and the car sped away. Michelle, who was still out in town, then got a Facebook message from a neighbor of her parents. "Please call me ASAP." It read. A few minutes later, more calls came flooding into the Riverside Police Department. The house was on fire at Price Court. It was Mark and Sherry's. Michelle jumped in the car with her husband, and they started heading across town. She was calling her mom, dad, and sister repeatedly, but no one was picking up. At Price Court, authorities were now there and tackling the blaze. The windows were starting to smash because of the heat, and the roof was caving in. As firefighters made it inside, they found the bodies of Mark, Sherry, and Brooke lying closely together near the front door. They all had plastic bags over their heads and were bound and gagged. They were already dead, and their neighbors watched in horror as they were pulled from the home. Michelle and her husband pulled up to her parents' house just after this, and Michelle tried to run through the tape as the police dragged her back. Her parents' and sister's cars were still parked outside, and although it was too early to tell who had been inside, Michelle soon heard that several bodies had already been carried out. As a shaken Michelle headed to the station with the police, other officers were trying to track down the red Kia. Michelle told them about the strange phone calls that morning and the detective inside her parents' house. She said there was no way the man would have got inside the house without showing some form of ID. Sherry would never have let him in without this, no matter what he said. Police were still not confirming anything. But when Michelle told them about her father's 2 tattoos on each arm, a Green Bay Packers logo on his left and a Notre Dame mascot on his right, she was faced with a situation that she had somehow been trying to rationalize and come up with excuses for. Her mother, father, and sister were inside the house, and her niece was now missing. On Friday morning, Riverside police were called to the home for a disturbance. Shortly afterwards, neighbors reported a fire in the home, and firefighters made the grisly discovery. The details of this will just break your heart. I mean, it is absolutely gut-wrenching. This is the home where the fire happened, and where the triple homicide happened. And friends came by earlier today to light the candles again, as the sun disappeared into the night. This is still a crime scene investigation, 1 of 3. And next door, the lady had just taken her turkey out of the refrigerator the day after Thanksgiving, walked in the backyard for a second, and saw the smoke in the back of the house, and went to the front, and saw flames coming out. That's when she called 911 on her next-door neighbors, who she says were more like family, the most loving people, she said, you could ever meet. Every neighborhood needs a Winnick family, because they just were the all-American, loving, caring, supporting family that you can ever ask for. It's been really hard on this neighborhood, and thankfully we've met some amazing people here, but it's been, as you can imagine, so hard on this community. They have lived here for 22 years, despite people wondering if the fire had caused their deaths. An autopsy would later reveal that Mark, Sherry, and Brooke had all likely died of asphyxiation. They had been bound and gagged before plastic bags were put over their heads, and Brooke's throat had been slashed. Mark was killed first, and they could see from the injuries that Brooke had really tried hard to fight off the attacker. 3 of the family's dogs would also die in the fire, along with their pet bird. Their 4th dog, which had been in the backyard at the time, survived and went into a shelter whilst a new home was found. For the small, quiet community, and everyone that knew the family, it was impossible to believe that anything like this could happen on their doorsteps. Around the same time all of this was going on, over 2,000 miles away in Virginia, a woman was filing a missing persons report. Her boyfriend of 5 years had taken off, and now she couldn't get hold of him. The couple had been celebrating Thanksgiving together in San Diego for a few days with her parents, when he suddenly started packing to leave. He said he had run out of vacation time and needed to drive back to Virginia, where he had just purchased a house. But the drive would take over a day, and this hadn't been their plan. Little did she know, he hadn't set off to Virginia. He had set off for Riverside, California, and she would soon realize it was her boyfriend that was now on the run with the missing 15-year-old girl. Using the license plate the neighbor had previously given them, police in Riverside were finally able to track down the red Kia as it was heading into Kelso, an unincorporated area of San Bernardino County, on a totally empty and rural road, far away from anything. They caught up to the car, and a SWAT team and helicopter were in pursuit. The man finally pulled over and jumped out of the car, firing his gun. He showed no signs of backing down. A shootout ensued with the man as the girl ran from the car. In a matter of seconds, the driver was dead, and the teen was with the police. Most reports state that he had turned the gun on himself, but some say he was killed by police fire. The 15-year-old, who to this day has never been named, was alive and unharmed. She was taken into protective custody before they began interviewing her. She and her sister also began a lengthy process of trauma counseling, and a GoFundMe raised over $100,000, which would be given to the girls. Upon hearing that she had been found alive, Michelle commended the neighbor for being so diligent in reporting the number plate, and for persisting they look into it. She believes it absolutely saved her niece's life. The man who had kidnapped her and killed her family was 28-year-old Austin Lee Edwards, a serving Virginia State Deputy Sheriff. To the authorities' surprise, the teen said she did actually know Austin, having met him online, but he was not the person she thought he was. The pair had started speaking on Omegle, a free online chat site that allows people to socialize with others without the need to register or create an account. The site randomly pairs users in one-on-one chat sessions where they talk anonymously using the names you and stranger. She had been honest about her age, but Austin had told her that he was 17. It is unknown what, if any, pictures he was using or who he was pretending to be. The police couldn't determine how long they had actually been talking for. She said after this, she stopped talking to him. Detectives theorized that maybe he killed her family in retaliation, or he thought that if he kidnapped her, he could stop her from talking to anyone. They also couldn't rule out the possibility that he did have some explicit photos of her, and maybe this was an attempt at sextortion. His messages showed he was clearly obsessed and was going to stop at nothing, but with more than 1 million pages of social media content to go through, it was safe to say the full story would take some time to come to light. A community gathers outside the Winnick family home on Price Court in Riverside. Neighbors holding vigil for the family, killed the day after Thanksgiving. At the vigil, the victim's daughter thanked the community for all of its support. "We really need it, and we are really appreciative." Members of the Arlington High School baseball team among those at the home last night, because Mark Winnick was their coach. The team tweeted out the world won't know what he meant to the team. And other athletes and students who showed up said he touched their lives as well. "Because we didn't have rides home after school. He would always talk to us for an hour, and I know he didn't like it, but we'd always try to keep him away from baseball because you were so jealous, because you guys kind of stole him from us, but we loved every second with him. One of my favorite memories is when my sister hit a walk-off, and he just gave my sister and I a big hug after the game. We are here to support her and the rest of their family, to make sure that they have peace as they're going through this process of heartbreak and of a loss of not just one person but 3. Joy organized the candlelight vigil. She says Mark Winnick was a local coach and he always kept a watchful eye over the neighborhood. "I just feel so much sorrow for the family, and I wish I could do more and more and more." Investigators say after setting the home on fire, the suspect left with another relative. It's not clear if she went willingly, but the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department confirms. She's now safe after a pursuit Friday afternoon near Needles. Deputies say the suspect was shooting at them, but eventually deputies shot and killed the suspect. Both agencies investigating this complicated case say they expect to release new information very soon. As for the family, I talked with a relative who says they will soon start fundraising for those 3 funerals. The teen told police that morning that she had no idea what was going on as she and Brooke pulled up to the house. She said she had waited in the car following Brooke's instructions, but it ended up getting too hot. She took her shoes off and stood outside for some air before tentatively walking inside the house to see what was going on. As soon as she went through the door, the first thing she saw was her grandmother Sherry with a bag over her head and her hands tied. She was still moving slightly. Before she had time to process anything, Austin appeared and pointed a gun at her and ordered that she leave with him. It is unknown where he was driving her, or what if any conversations took place in his car, and Austin was now dead and couldn't answer for himself. So who was he, and what did they know about him? Commencement at the State Police Training Academy. The new troopers have received 1,300 hours of classroom and field instruction in more than 100 different subjects. During the ceremony, Governor Glenn Youngkin spoke, saying that he's excited for the beginning in the Commonwealth with this new class of troopers. Austin Lee Edwards. Division I Henrico 28-year-old Austin Edwards had joined the police academy in July 2021, and after graduating a year later, he went to Henrico County within the Richmond Division of Virginia. He resigned from the department after a couple of months, but no reason could be given for him leaving, as it was not in his personnel file. A month after leaving, Austin was still associated with the Washington County Sheriff's Office and stepped into the patrol division as a Virginia State Deputy Sheriff. A little under 2 weeks before he drove to California, in a small town of less than 2,000 people, Austin had purchased a new home. Neighbors said he was friendly and they felt safe around him knowing he was a police officer, feeling a certain level of protection from him. Austin spent a lot of time blacking out all the windows in his home, but less than 10 days after moving in, Austin Lee Edwards, the Winnecks and their pets would all be dead in another state. And now to developing news out of Riverside. It was last week when 3 family members were found murdered and their homes set ablaze in Riverside. Investigators say the murders were linked to a catfishing scheme carried out by a 28-year-old Virginia law enforcement officer. The suspect Austin Edwards here allegedly portrayed himself as a teenager to develop an online relationship with the teen daughter of one of the murder victims. He then reportedly drove across the country to meet the girl and is then accused of murdering her mother and 2 grandparents and trying to abduct her as well. Never imagined anything, like this, and was actually very, very happy to have an officer leaving behind me. I felt safe. According to Smith County, Virginia records, Edwards also recently purchased a home in Saltville from Jacob Gordon. I had the house on the market for just a few hours, and I got a full price offer, and I was told it was a Virginia State Trooper. He was only behind me for about 8 days. He was actually very nice, accommodating. He offered to help me on my home. After purchasing the home, it appears he blacked out windows and put up dark curtains. I thought it was really weird. And then of course the owner told me also that he required that they sent the video of the basement. He didn't see the property before he purchased it, but he required a video of the basement, which seemed really weird to us. And of course the guy who lived in front of him that I know, he said that he had a very strange presence, that the guy was very weird, creepy, kept in his house. He didn't get out a lot. Short time here. He'd already set off alarms. Gordon's still processing the news out of California. It still doesn't feel real. It's something you never dream of. Any of us are impressionable. You can imagine back when you were 15. It's just you trust people, and it's just a different world out there, and people have to realize that this guy's a monster. He's a predator. We believe at this point that this suspect was the only one involved in the murders and in setting the fire. The online deception, catfishing, other techniques happens daily. It's probably going on right now somewhere in the country, in our county. As much as being a parent isn't fun sometimes, I have been there. You've got to check their devices, put filters, have parental controls on these things. We don't even feel comfortable affiliating him with law enforcement, because that's not what someone in law enforcement is about. As the investigation was unraveling, over in Washington, one woman was scrolling aimlessly on Instagram when she landed on a picture that made her freeze. It was a photo of Austin. Not only was the story his face was attached to horrific, she had her own story from years ago. She had met Austin on Upbuckle 2. He was 20, she just 13, and he had groomed, stalked, and harassed her for years. She almost threw up when she saw him. I read the whole story, and it made me feel disgusting, she said. Seeing everything that had happened to the Winnick family over in California, the now 21-year-old took her story to the police and was able to offer up almost 4,000 messages between the pair from years ago. Austin had started off sweet and chatty, and she told him right away that she was 13, but this did not deter him from talking to her. He soon started asking for nude photographs and told her he loved her. He often spoke about hurting himself as a way of release. On one occasion, he insisted she join him on Skype. I can't yet, she told him. Why's that? He replied. Because my mom, she said. Kill her. I'ma give myself a black eye, okay? He replied. Listen, there's no obstacle that's going to stop us from being together, if that's what we both want. It doesn't even matter if you're 14 and not technically allowed to do shit yet, he said. She eventually cut ties with him, but this didn't stop him trying to get hold of her. Another thing that the messages brought to light was something serious that had happened in 2016. The Virginia State Police officer who kidnapped a 15-year-old girl in Riverside and killed her family had a glaring red flag on his record that apparently was not detected by Virginia authorities. 2 weeks after the teen had told him she didn't want to talk to him, Austin had been detained for psychiatric evaluation after threatening to take his own life and kill his father. Police had been called to the home by Austin's dad, Christopher. They found him trying to restrain Austin on the kitchen floor, which was covered in blood. Christopher had bite marks all over his arms. Police pulled out a taser, but Christopher said he could handle it. Still trying to protect his son, eventually Austin was handcuffed, strapped to a stretcher, and checked into a hospital. He said he had had an argument with his girlfriend and was lashing out, his girlfriend being the 14-year-old who was trying to get away from him. Despite blocking him on every account, he made new ones and always found a way to reach her. The harassment went on for years until she was 18, when it all abruptly stopped. It is unknown whether this coincided with meeting the 15-year-old online, but investigations show the timings match up for this to be a possibility. Upon sending him to a mental health hospital in 2016, the judge said there was a substantial likelihood, as a result of mental illness, he will in the near future seriously harm himself or suffer harm. The incident also prompted the judge to strip him of his gun rights. Under Virginia law, anyone who is held on a temporary detention order and later admitted to a treatment facility is not allowed to buy or possess a firearm until that right has been restored by the courts. His gun rights were never restored. On his application to the academy, Austin disclosed that he had voluntarily checked himself into a mental health facility, which meant he had to undergo a mental health evaluation and exam. He failed. Austin used his father, a close friend, and his Virginia State Police field training officer as references for the academy, and despite the failed evaluations and the fact the court had taken his gun rights away, he was still accepted. The Virginia State Police deliberately buried the results of this mental health examination, did no further examination into this aspect of Edward's application, and hired him, a notice said. Arte Savido, the interim police chief for the Aurora, Colorado Police Department, and a nationally recognized policing expert, said, "I'd have to ask a lot of questions about why he's moving so quickly. That's pretty unusual for someone to go through academy and all of a sudden turn around and leave." He said most departments would be unlikely to hire Austin after such a brief work history unless he enrolled in their own police academy. With all of this coming to light, Michelle and her family wanted answers, but they weren't getting any. The Washington County Sheriff said, "It is shocking and sad to the entire law enforcement community that such an evil and wicked person could infiltrate law enforcement while concealing his true identity as a computer predator and murderer." But the Virginia State Police said, "He didn't ever display any red flags. He was the nicest person and loved helping people in his job." They said he had no reprimands, no complaints, no instances of use of force levied, no internal investigations, and no disciplinary investigations. Michelle said that not one department ever apologized or even acknowledged them for a period of time. "Good morning, and thank you for everyone for being here today. My family and I truly appreciate the love and the compassion that we have received thus far in this trying time. If something like this horrific tragedy can happen here in our neighborhood, in our community, it can happen anywhere. In this tragic moment of our family, our grief, we hope some good will come from this. Parents, please know your child's online activity. Ask questions about what they are doing and whom they are talking to. Anybody can say they're someone else, and you could be in this situation, which I do not want for the world. This horrific event started with an inappropriate online romance between a predator and a child. We have some solace that this person will never harm anyone again, but we also want to make it very clear that we do not applaud his death. This was an adult that traveled across the country to kidnap a 15-year-old girl. My niece, our family member. He took an oath to protect, and yet he failed to do so. Instead, he preyed on the most vulnerable. When you hear the term catfishing, you think of a long-running dating show or series about a national sports figure, both glamorizing and sensationalizing online relationships. However, in this instance, catfishing led to the deaths of the 3 most important people in my life. Please, parents, guardians, when you are talking to your children about the dangers of their online actions, please use us as a reference. Tell our story to help your parenting, not out of fear, but out of example of something that did happen. There are no words for the gratitude we feel for the outpouring of support that we have received. And I know that we will continue to receive. For my 2 young nieces who are now left motherless, we hope that this community can wrap your arms around them and lift them up. They have the most difficult journey ahead as they are minors and they don't understand everything that has happened. We hope and we ask that this community continue to shelter them. Please positively support them. Eventually, Virginia State Police would issue a statement and say it was an isolated incident, adding, "Human error resulted in an incomplete database query during Edward's hiring process. They said that if they knew about his past, he wouldn't have been hired." Riverside Police Chief Larry Gonzalez said, "This is yet another horrific reminder of the predators existing online who prey on our children. If you've already had a conversation with your kids on how to be safe online and on social media, have it again. If not, start now to better protect them." After all of these failings were highlighted, Governor Glenn Youngkin requested a full investigation be carried out by the state's watchdog agency. An agreement with the watchdog agency later allowed Virginia State Police to investigate themselves. Michelle and her family filed a notice of intent to sue in relation to the hiring process of Austin and the failures that had ensued. She said, her attorneys said Austin's employers demonstrated negligence, gross negligence, negligent and gross negligent hiring, breach of mandatory duties and other violations of Virginia state law. They argued that the family's damages exceeded $100 million. Even though Austin is now dead and cannot give anyone any information, police say they are continuing to look into his past, his laptop and his phones to determine if he has any more victims and piece together more of his story. But with so many pages of messages from only 2 people so far, police say they could be unraveling things for years and might never know the full truth. Mark, Sherry, and Brooke, along with their beloved pets, died in the most frightening of ways, terrified and trying to protect each other. Michelle said Mark was dearly loved by the kids he coached, and he left a big impact on many, with some saying he shaped their futures and what they wanted to do when they were older. He would always make sure he checked on them from time to see if everything was going well for them in college. The school paid tribute to him as well. His neighbors said he was someone that never stopped and loved being busy. He would offer to mow people's lawns to help them out and to pass the time. Sherry loved nothing more than being with her family. Celebrations like Thanksgiving and Christmas were her favorite times of year, when everyone could just be together and she would bake cakes and cookies for her children and grandchildren. We had a family debate, and it got heated on if the brownies my mom made should be frosted with sprinkles or just left plain, Michelle said. Little did I know on that day, that would be the last time my husband and I would see my parents and sister again. Brooke was a single parent, and Michelle said her biggest joys in life were watching her 2 girls grow and collecting Starbucks cups. Michelle laughed. Brooke was telling everyone that her daughter had joined the color guard at school, and nothing made her prouder than watching her. For the girls and Michelle who were left behind, it is impossible to imagine how they must find each day. Celebrations such as birthdays, Christmas, and Thanksgiving will never be the same, and what should be such a happy time to be with each other. will always serve as a painful reminder of what was taken from them. In a touching tribute, Price Court in Riverside was ceremoniously renamed Winnock Court and is placed next to the Winnocks' home. Eric, Mark's nephew, and godson, said Mark and Sherry's pride and joy were their kids, and by extension their grandchildren. You never saw them beamed so brightly than when they were around their family.